Welcome back to Grimhammer. Today's video, we got one of my favorite characters in all of Warhammer, the Lord of Death. But before we get into that, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and send any hype points this way. Now, let's get into the video.
Baal had always been a wound. From orbit, it looked almost beautiful, a red jewel drowned in the dark. Up close, it was a world of dust and bone, a sphere scoured by ancient firestorms and poisoned by the fallout of a dead age. The winds that stalked its deserts were not simple weather, but relics of orbital bombardments and reactor deaths, laden with powdered glass and the ghosts of cities. They howled across the wastes, clawing at the few remaining habitable valleys where the tribes clung to existence. Brother Calistarius remembered those winds. In his mind, he stood once more upon the red sands, a stripling tribesman, with a stolen blade at his side, and the taste of ash in his mouth. He remembered the sky, a pale rust colour, streaked with the contrails of distant gunships. Above, even those, barely visible, the fortress monastery hung in low orbit, a tooth of adamantium sunk into the throat of the heavens. He had looked up at that distant shape until his eyes burned, never really, believing the angels within would come for him. They had. They always did. The memory bled away like dust on the wind, and Calistarius was no longer a half-starved savage, but a librarian of the blood angels, walking beneath vaulted arches, carved with the glories and agonies of his gene line. The librarium was a cathedral to thought, a temple of chained storms. Books bound in flensed hide and sanctified leather lined its walls. Warded nodes glowed faintly between them, each a prison for something that was once thought and had tried to become more. He moved in silence, his bootsteps muted by the rich, dark stone of the floor. Red armour echoed the walls and banners, but the left shoulder guard of his warplate was the deep blue of his order, etched with the sigils of psychic mastery. The hood mounted around the back of his skull, and Gorget hummed softly, a halo of adamantine coils and arcane circuitry that turned his thoughts into a weapon and, when necessary, a shield. The warp pressed against him, even here. It pulsed at the edge of his thoughts like a sea against a breakwater. Whispers gnawed at the wards, cries of the dying caught in the immaterium, laughter that was not really laughter at all. Promises murmured in a dozen tongues dead since before the Imperium was born. He kept his breathing slow, his focus narrow, his mental armour layered and relayered with the care of long practice. Crimson wings, oceans of blood, a hunger that was not his. The visions came more often now. They flickered at the edge of his waking sight and deepened when his eyes closed. Sometimes they were little more than impressions. The brush of feathers against his brow, the warmth of a hand upon his shoulder, the echo of a noble voice whispering his name. Sometimes they were storms, cataclysms that hurled him into the heart of a throne room drenched in ruin. A golden angel broken at his feet, and a monster in baroque black armour laughing with a voice like thunder. He stopped before one of the many statues of Sanguinius and let the current tug at him. The Primarch stood carved in marble that had once been bone white and was now tinged faintly pink by the dust of Baal that permeated everything in the fortress. Wings spread, blade lowered in benediction rather than raised in strike. He seemed impossibly calm. In the sculptor's imagination, the wounds of his death did not stain his flesh. Here he was, forever before that final encounter, forever the angel of hope and sacrifice, rather than the martyr. Calistarius found that lie comforting and infuriating in turn. You knew, he thought, as he always did. You saw every strand of fate that led to your death and beyond, and you went anyway. You chose the path, and we choke upon it still. The Vox rune at his collar clicked alive, a spark of hard reality through the dream fugue. Lexicanium Calistarius. The voice was deep, edged with the rasp of age and old scar tissue. Report to Strategium Primus at once. The rune identified the caller even before the tone did. Captain Raphael of the First Company rarely wasted words. Calistarius bowed his head by reflex, though none could see him. "By your command," he said. He turned from the statue and left the librarium's cool, warded gloom for the harsher light of the fortress monastery's main halls. Servitors shuffled aside, their flesh masked with brass and parchment seals. Mortal serfs in simple crimson tunics pressed themselves against walls or dropped to one knee as he passed, heads lowered, hands making the sign of the Aquila. Their fear and reverence brushed against his mind, bright little sparks in the great darkness. He stepped around them without comment. They lived. They died. Others took their place. Only the blood endured. The strategium's doors were heavy adamantium, overlaid with relief work showing Sanguinius at the Eternity Gate. They swung inward at his approach, admitting him to a chamber shaped like a great octagon, its dome painted with scenes of the Great Crusade and the dark days that followed. In the center, a hololithic display projected an image of the Baal system, blue and ghostly, icons drifting in precise orbits. Strike cruisers and battle barges shone as hard flecks of light, the steel fangs of the chapter. Beyond them, in the outer void, a larger shape rotated. It was a warped, flickering mass of tangled signatures, wrong even as a projection. A knot of metal and stone and void hull that reflected no transponder codes and answered no hails. The sin of damnation. The name rose unbidden in his thoughts, an echo from the librarium's archives and from older, darker sources. A space hulk that had threatened Baal once before, its twisted corridors already wet with Blood Angel's blood. It was a scar on the chapter's history, an unhealed wound that had drifted away into the warp, only to be vomited forth again into real space like something the universe could not quite digest. At the hololith's edge stood Raphael. The captain of the first company was a giant, even by the standards of his kind. His Terminator plate made him look like a walking fortress, all layered ceramite and ceramite, but there was nothing ponderous about him. His presence carried a stillness that came from long wars, from battles measured not in hours or days, but in centuries of accumulated violence. One of his eyes was a bionic orb that clicked faintly as it tracked the rotating image. Beside him waited a chaplain in ebony armor carved with scripture and skulls. His helm, a stylized death's head, rested crook-armed against his hip. The crozius in his gauntleted fist crackled with caged lightning. "Brother," Raphael said, inclining his head as Calistarius approached. "The librarium sent its storm quickly." Calistarius returned the nod. "Captain, honored chaplain." The chaplain's gaze was a pressure more than a look, as if the weight of an entire creed rested behind his eyes. With most librarians, that tension would have been a simple matter of caution. Among the Blood Angels, it was layered with other concerns, unspoken but always present. The flaw, the red thirst, the black rage. A psyker in such a gene line was a blade balanced upon another blade. Raphael gestured at the hololith. The projection swelled under his gauntlet's command, focusing on the outer system. The sin of damnation grew in the air, an ugly, tumorous knot of hulls and asteroids fused together by the caprice of the warp. The outlines of its constituent ships were half visible in the haze. The broken spine of a warship from the Great Crusade, the flensed carcass of an alien craft, the shattered ribs of a pilgrim liner. "Translation was detected 12 hours ago," Raphael said. "Our patrol vessels fell back on my order. We have observed no signals beyond a constant psychic howl. The chaplains recognized the echo. It stinks of the great devourer," the chaplain said. "Genestealer taint, an old stain on our honor." Calistarius reached out with his mind, letting his perception drift to brush against the hololithic image's data feed. For a moment his sight was not of the strategium at all, but of the dead cold of the outer void. Stars burned in their millions, distant and uncaring. The sin of damnation turned slowly, its mass a void in the warp, a dead zone surrounded by a crawling halo of life. He felt them, the genestealers. Predator minds cunning and utterly alien. each one a node in a network that reached beyond the system, beyond the gulfs between stars, back towards something vaster and hungrier than any mortal soul could truly comprehend. Beneath that lurked other impressions. Ghosts of human terror etched into the corridors of the hulk, soldiers dying in the dark, prayers cut short by choked screams. And beneath even that, beneath the human and the Xenos, there was an echo like the aftershock of some great distant impact. Crimson wings, a broken angel, a throne of corpses and ruin. His hand tightened on the edge of the console. For a heartbeat, the stars shifted, and he was no longer looking at the Bell system at all, but at a hive-world sky turned sickly green by smoke and burning promethium. Gunships screamed overhead. The horizon seethed with orc craft, crude silhouettes belching black exhaust as they clawed toward a line of fortress walls hammered by artillery and the endless roar of guns. Armageddon. A name that was not yet written upon any mission orders, but which burned across his inner vision in letters of fire. Lexicanium, Raphael said, bringing him back. Calistarius blinked once, slow and deliberate, resetting his focus on the present. The hololith flickered, the Masoretic runes of the cogitators dancing as the sin of damnation turned. "It is infested," he said. His voice was calm, the words dry as baylight dust. Genestealer broods in the tens of thousands. No central, synapse creature that I can sense. They are a shattered spear tip, severed from the tyrannid hive mind, but still deadly. Raphael's expression did not change, but a small ripple of satisfaction passed through his aura. "Good," he said. "Feral, then. Dangerous, but not guided. We can deal with that." "Left to drift," the chaplain murmured. "It will not remain a simple infestation. The warp will bear it toward the planets below. Our recruiting tribes, our serfs, the fortress itself. Imagine those things loose in the vaults, among the sarcophagi of our honored dead." Calistarius had imagined worse. He did not say so. "The commander has declared the hulk a blasphemy," Raphael said. "We will answer. Boarding torpedoes, Terminator cadres, veterans of the First Company. We tear out its heart, every brood, every nest, every egg. You will be seconded to my command for the duration as an honorary member of the company. Your sight will be the point of our spear. Honorary." The word tasted like iron. He had fought beside the First Company before, of course. Librarians went where they were needed. But to be folded into their number, even temporarily, was a mark Dante did not grant lightly. Calistarius inclined his head. "I am at the chapter's service." The chaplain's gaze did not soften. "You fought with strange fury at Melchior," the priest said. "Eyes black as void, teeth bared, roaring our father's name, as if you stood upon the vengeful spirit itself. Some of the sanguinary priests whisper that the black rage brushed you, that you tore apart heretics, as if their blood were a draught you had waited millennia to taste." Raphael's jaw tightened, but he did not intervene. Calistarius met the chaplain's stare. "I remember Melchior," he said. "A world in revolt, an entire continent chanting praises to the dark gods while they burned their own children to ashes in sacrificial pyres. The warp was a storm, of their madness. If I was wrathful, it was an echo of the Emperor's judgment, nothing more." "Nothing more," the chaplain repeated, doubt tangible. "You stand nearer the edge than most, Calistarius. The Librarius walks a path strewn with bones at the best of times. For our kind, that path lies along a cliff's lip." "If I fall," Calistarius said, and now a shard of cold amusement did colour his voice, "you will paint my armour black and aim me at the worst of our foes. Until then, you may trust that my rage is a weapon, not a chain." Raphael's gauntlet cracked down on the edge of the console. "Enough," he said. "We do not have the luxury to gnaw old fears tonight. The hulk will not purge itself. We launch as soon as the torpedoes are loaded. Calistarius, Terminator plate has been prepared for you. You will board at my side." There was nothing more to say. The launch chamber stank of machine oil, sanctified incense, and cold metal. Calistarius stood within the armoured cocoon of his borrowed tactical dreadnought plate, feeling the weight settle across his shoulders. Terminator armour was a relic, a walking shrine of composite plating and field generators, its inner surfaces inscribed with litanies etched by the hands of artisans long turned to dust. His own warplate felt almost light in comparison. The psychic hood had been integrated into the suit's bulk, its coils and wards redone in the sigils of his office. Raphael's squad waited around him, giants in alabaster trimmed crimson, their storm bolters maglocked to massive gauntlets, their power fists and lightning claws flexing as systems ran final checks. Their helm lenses glowed a dull red. Each bore the teardrop of the blood angels upon their chest, some adorned with additional honours and campaign badges. They did not speak to him. He did not blame them. Librarians unsettled line brothers simply by existing. Battle psychers were necessary, revered even, but there was wariness in every glance. And these were the first company, the veterans who stood between the chapter and oblivion. They trusted their own proven tools more than any storm brought in from outside. At length, one of them broke the silence. A sergeant by the markings on his armour, his crux terminatus heavily gilded, a small chalice icon on his right knee indicating a veteran of more campaigns than Calistarius cared to count. "Which?" the sergeant said, not unkindly, his voice a rasp over the internal vox. "I have heard tales of you." Calistarius turned his helm slightly. "Sergeant," he acknowledged. "They say you saw the ambush on Lethis before the treacherous guard even pulled their triggers," the sergeant continued. "They say you burned a cult out of the bones of an entire hive with a single thought." A pause, then a dry chuckle. "They say a great many foolish things, in truth. I will settle for this. When the Genestealers come, do not let your storms cook my brothers as well." Calistarius let the faintest smile bend his mouth, unseen under the helm. "If any of you fall beneath my lightning, Sergeant, it will be because you step between my hand and something more deserving." "Good answer," the sergeant said. "I am Leonis. Stay at Raphael's shoulder, and we will see you through the dark." Warning runes flared. Massive clamps shuddered as the boarding torpedoes were winched into the launch tubes. The deck vibrated with the heartbeat of the ship's engines, lining up the firing solutions. Raphael's voice cut across the vox. "Brothers, our target is the sin of damnation. You all know its history. You know the blood already spilled within its halls. Today we write a different ending. We deny the great devourer its teeth. We deny the warp another ghost to gnaw upon. We do our Father's work." The chaplain's baritone rolled over Raphael's words, a litany of vengeance and purification, the old formulae that had steadied the hearts of angels since before the heresy. "By the blood of Sanguinius," the chaplain intoned, "by the will of him on terror, we go now into the dark. We are the blade in the night. We are the storm in the void. We are his red right hand." The torpedo's hatch clanged shut. Darkness swallowed them, save for the glow of internal runes. Gravity faltered as the launch systems cycled. Then there was the hollow thump of massive machinery, and the world became acceleration, pressing Calistarius back into his harness as the torpedo hurled itself from the cruiser's flank and into the abyss. He reached out again as the hull rattled around them. The void greeted him with its familiar cold indifference. Behind, the cruiser was a great burning presence in his mind, a caged thunderhead of machine spirits and human souls woven together. Ahead, the sin of damnation loomed, an absence that became a presence as they closed. The warp ran thin around the hulk, currents, bent and twisted by mass and by the echo of so much death. Within it, the Genestealers stirred, alerted by distant vibrations and the prickling intuition of predators long denied fresh meat. Claws against metal, flickers of tongues tasting recycled air, the scrape of chitin through rust. He saw their paths before they took them. In the eye of his mind, corridors unfolded like veins through a diseased organ, ducts and maintenance shafts like capillaries. He saw where they would gather, where they would swarm, where the broodlords would send their children to die in the teeth of stormbolter fire. And beneath it all, under the alien hunger and the human fear, that other echo pulsed. A heartbeat that was not his, wings broken and still beating, a death yet to be fully understood. Beneath him, Baal turned, wounded and patient. Somewhere far in his future, a hive world named Armageddon burned. He closed his eyes and let the torpedo carry him forward into the waiting jaws of the Hulk. Armageddon hung in the void like a cauterized scar. From the command decks of the Blood Angels fleet, the hive world was a poison marble wreathed in storms. Ash clouds swirled across its face in endless gyres, stained green and black by the industry of a million manufactoria. Fire bloomed upon its surface like brief, furious flowers, each detonation another regiment dying, another hab block reduced to slag. Between that wounded world and the cold stars, fleets killed one another. Void shields flared and died. Torpedoes burned across the dark, their contrails the only beauty this age allowed. Orc kill cruisers, ugly masses of bolted plate and jury-rigged cannon, vomited crude barrages toward the Imperial lines, their hulls thrumming with the manic joy of the greenskins crammed inside. In answer, Imperial battleships, cruisers, and escorts fired in precise volleys, macro cannon shells glowing like falling meteorites, lance beams stabbing with surgical contempt through ramshackle armor. Among that steel storm, Blood Angels strike cruisers gleamed like shards of a murdered sun. On one of them, Calistarius stood in the strategium and listened to the death of a world. He had walked the red deserts of Baal. He had fought in the steel womb of the sin of damnation, where the corridors were slick with alien ichor and the warp whispered in every shadow. He had seen his brothers die in the dark and had guided others to victory by visions that tasted of ash and broken wings. All of that had been a prelude. Armageddon was something else. Armageddon was war distilled. Holo displays showed the hive world from orbit, then magnified, layer by layer, until individual hive cities burned in miniature. Icons marked guard regiments by the thousand, Titan legions striding like small gods through the dust, entire chapters of Astartes as tiny blood-red teardrops poised along defensive lines. Opposite them, the orcs were a spreading sickness, crude glyphs breeding like mold. Across the surface, each representing a warband tens of thousands strong. "Second war for Armageddon," someone said behind him, one of the mortal officers, voice hushed despite himself. As if the first was not enough. Calistarius did not answer. His gaze was fixed on one icon, one wounded jewel among many. Hades' Hive. It was a fortress built by a fearful age. Concentric rings of curtain walls and bastions, void shield towers knifing up through fouled air, gun emplacements like forests of steel. Even now, from this height, he could see the scars of siege. Outlying habstacks flattened into rubble fields, the outerworks hammered to blackened stumps. Around it, the orcs were a moving stain, endless, crude, exuberant in their hatred. He reached out with his mind. The warp was a storm here, torn and fouled by the sheer weight of slaughter below. So many souls screaming, so many dying in fire and steel, and the sucking ruin of vacuum. The immaterium echoed with their terror and fury, their prayers and curses. The ruinous powers watched, delighted, feeding on the endless loop of death. The shadow of the great devourer brushed the edges of perception, not here in flesh but latent in the genestealer cults and the endless hunger in the alien part of creation. And beneath everything, like a low drumbeat, he felt his bloodline's curse. A broken angel dying, a golden man with wings, crumpled at the feet of a giant in horned armor. A throne room spattered in holy blood. That vision, that echo, was louder here than he had ever known it. Brother Librarian. The voice that broke his concentration was familiar. Captain Raphael stood at his side, helm held under one arm, expression carved of stone. The first company had already deployed to the surface. Raphael had remained in orbit to coordinate the chapter's war effort, but even he could not be held away from the front forever. Hades calls, Raphael said simply. Lord Dante has ordered a relief. Strike. Yarrick holds, but the greenskins press him on all sides. The Commissar's guardsmen bleed by the regiment. We go to lend our weight. Calistarius watched the hollow for a heartbeat longer, then nodded. The Emperor wills it, he said. When the drop pods slammed through the atmosphere, the world clawed at them. Fire licked at their ceramic skins. Turbulence shook them, made the harness straps bite into ceramite and flesh. The vox was a hiss of static and distant screams. Calistarius sat in the darkness, cradled in his restraints, and listened to a planet at war. Somewhere far below, men and women who would never see the inside of a strike cruiser died in droves, so that this deployment might mean something. He tasted them on the warp's breath. Whole cities' worth of souls flaring and going dark. Target coordinates locked, intoned a machine voice. Hades Hive, upper bastion levels. 83rd wall segment, section Gamma. Estimated orc saturation, extreme. Extreme, grunted a sergeant across the harness circle. Good. The pod screamed as retro rockets fired. Impact turned motion into violence. The pod hit the bastion roof hard enough to crack ferrocrete that had withstood decades of shelling. Explosive bolts blew, petals of plated metal folding outward, smoke and dust gusting in. Orc war cries howled on the wind, lost under the boom of heavy guns and the whip crack of lass fire. The blood angels surged out into hell. Hades' walls were a maze of emplacements and killing fields. Sandbagged parapets, bunkers dug into the superstructure, gun pits overflowing with brass. Guardsmen in hazard yellow flak armour and burnished helmets manned heavy bolters and battle cannons, their faces grey with exhaustion, their eyes sunken but burning with fanatic resolve. Beyond the walls, the land fell away in stepped terraces of ruin. Hab stacks reduced to jagged silhouettes, the streets between them choked with orcs. The greenskins came on in waves, bellowing and firing whatever crude weapons they carried. Sluggers spat inaccurate but constant fire. Rockets screamed overhead, leaving trails of angry colour. Knobs in patched armour and looted imperial plate waded through their lesser kin, roaring louder than the guns, gesturing with chain axes and power claws as they drove the tide forward. Calistarius stepped up to the parapet, Stormbolter barking as he shot an orc knob from his ramshackle warbike, and opened his inner eye. The world shifted. Lines of probability flared in his sight. He saw where the next orc wave would crest over the ruined hab blocks, where their war machines would grind into view, where the guards' defences were thin, and where a single lucky hit would turn a wall section into a slaughter pen. Beyond that, he saw the incoming trajectories of artillery shells arcing from miles behind the line, the slow curve of basilisk fire, and the flatter, more savage paths of Earthshaker. Rounds. Sigma barrage, adjust 3 degrees sunward, he voxed, his voice cutting into the artillery net. Drop point 200 meters short of current prediction. Now. The guns obeyed. Great shells fell from the toxic sky, howling as they descended. They hit not the first ranks of orcs, but the second and third, the pressure point where the warbands would have pushed through the ruins and onto the final approach. The blasts churned the greenskin masses into fragments and black smoke, the shockwaves ripping apart those who survived. Calistarius felt the deaths as momentary flares in the warp, bright and brief. Battery Fenris, elevation down 5, left by 1, he snapped, already tracking the next knot of orcs forming behind a burned-out manufactorum. Fire in full pattern. The orcs died by the tens of thousands, atomized by artillery, raked apart by lass fire and bolter shells. They screamed and laughed and kept coming. For every tidal wave that broke and fell, back, another rose behind it. More bodies, more rusted armour, more crude banners painted with glyphs that stank of old nightmares. Days blurred. He did not sleep in any human sense. He closed his eyes when he could, snatching moments of meditation when the front shifted briefly from crisis to stalemate. But even then, the warp churned behind his lids. Hades' Hive was a furnace of souls. The Black Templars fought in the streets below, hacking orcs apart in alleys that ran ankle-deep with blood. Other chapters bled and burned in different hives. Guard regiments were fed into breaches and came out as corpses. On the walls, the blood angels held. The strain built with every sunrise that never quite pierced the pollution. In the crush of melee atop a shattered habspire, Calistarius parried a cleaver blow with the haft of his force staff, twisted, and broke the orc's neck with a burst of psychic force. For an instant, the greenskin was not a greenskin at all, but a warrior in midnight, clad, his armour black, trimmed in the colours of dusk and treachery. The snarling, tusked face became a rebreather grill and a mockery of laurels. The cleaver became a chain axe daubed with the eightfold symbol. He recoiled, heart hammering, only for reality to slam back as green blood sprayed his armour and the corpse tumbled into the choked streets below. Another orc came at him, and another. Their faces flickered between Xenos and traitor legionary, back and forth, a sickening overlay. Behind each, in every motion, he caught glimpses of a throne room drowned in light and despair, a giant in baroque black armour raising a taloned gauntlet, a golden angel charging toward him with tears on his cheeks and murder in his eyes. "Calistarius!" The shout cut through the vision. Raphael's gauntlet crashed into an orc's skull, twisting it around in a spray of colour and broken bone. The captain's other hand grasped Calistarius's shoulder plate, fingers biting deep into chiselled iconography. "Hold the line," Raphael snarled. "Whatever ghosts gnaw you, they can wait. The living are loud enough." Calistarius dragged his focus back into the present by main force. He killed and killed and killed, and every death tasted a little less real. The black rage did not come all at once. It seeped in like oil, like poison. In the inches of silence between bombardments, in the still seconds where he stared out over a battlefield carpeted in green corpses and human bodies in guard fatigues, he heard things. Not the whispers of demons or the jeering of orc gods, but a single, remembered voice. A father's voice. A Primarch's voice. You were not there, it seemed to say, in every echo, but you remember. Oh, my son, you remember. It happened during a counterattack. The ecclesiarchy complex at Hades had become a fortified keystone in the hive's defences, its once ornate spires now bristling with gun ports, and its stained glass shattered, replaced by slabs of plasteel engraved crudely with devotional litanies. Orcs had seized the outer cloisters, turning reliquary halls into kill zones and abbey gardens into assembly points for their war machines. If the Blood Angels took it back, they would have a springboard for breaking the siege. If they failed, the orcs would pour through the breach and drown the hive. The Death Company gathered in its shadow. They wore black, a deep, light-devouring black that swallowed the red of their origin. Their armour was scrawled with scripture litanies writ in their own blood. Their eyes were wild behind helm lenses, fixed on something far beyond the walls of Hades, far beyond Armageddon. Calistarius watched them from the steps of a shattered shrine, their howls thrumming in the warp like an off-key choir, and knew a curious thing. They frightened him less than they should. Their madness was honest. It had direction. They saw only one battle, only one enemy. Horus, the War Master. The apex betrayal of all history. Against that pure hatred, everything else was a distraction. Brother. The chaplain who approached him had exchanged his usual ivory skull helm for one overpainted in night black. His crozius was wreathed not merely in power field lightning but in parchments inscribed with the names of those who would die today. You feel it, the chaplain said. It was not a question. Calistarius did not answer. There is no shame in acknowledging it, the priest continued. Our father's death lives in us all, in them. He gestured at the Death Company. It roars. In others, it whispers. In you, I think, it does both. Is this what you came to tell me, Warden? Calistarius asked, voice dry. That I am neither wholly damned nor wholly sane. I came to tell you this, the chaplain said. When you fall, we will catch you. We will aim you. We will give your madness meaning. The counterattack began with light. Orbital. Strikes lashed down, columns of sunfire spearing into the orc forward positions around the ecclesiarchy complex. The ground vanished in glare and rolling thunder. Hab blocks atomized. Crude fortifications shattered. The air was a constant rain of dust and debris as something like daylight forced its way through the ash clouds. Over that man, made dawn came the Death Company. They moved like a tide, black armor streaked with filth and blood, jump packs screaming as they arced over the shattered outer walls and plunged into the orc lines. Their cries were not mortal sound. They roared Sanguinius's name as if they believed, with absolute, broken certainty, that the next foe they slew would finally be Horus. Calistarius found himself moving with them. He did not remember giving the order. One moment, he was on the shrine steps, watching the chaplain lift his Crozius and intone the final absolutions. The next, he was in the air, the world a blur of smoke and fire below. His jump pack howled. His force sword burned in his hand, wreathed in psychic flame. When he landed, he was not on Armageddon's soil at all. The deck plates beneath his boots were of gold, cracked and stained with burnt ichor. The walls around him were not habstacks and sanctuaries, but adamantium panels engraved with the heraldry of the lunar wolves, now defaced, repainted, twisted into something ugly. The air smelled not of promethium and orc sweat, but of ozone and incense, and the copper of angelic blood. He saw Horus. The Warmaster towered above him, armor black as midnight, edged in gold that seemed to absorb light. A great claw crackled with stolen power. His helm was off, his face a ruin of beauty and corruption, eyes filled with something older and colder than hate. Calistarius screamed and charged, but it was not Calistarius, it was Sanguinius. He felt the weight of wings unfurl from his shoulders, tattered but still strong. He felt the spear in his hands, the memory of 1,000 battles, the knowledge that he could not win and that he would not, could not, do anything else. "Warmaster!" he shouted, voice tearing. "Brother!" The clash was apocalyptic and endless, and he relived it in the space of heartbeats. In the real world, on the broken flagstones of an ecclesiarchy courtyard, he ploughed into the orcs like a falling star. His sword left trails of light, psychic energy carving through greenskin armor and flesh alike. Every stomp, every kick, every blow was a killing stroke. He hurled bodies aside without thought, crushed skulls with empty hands when his blade bit too deep and lodged. Somewhere at the edges of his awareness, he heard his name over the vox. Not Sanguinius, not Angel, Calistarius, brother, Lexicanium. He ignored it. There were only traitors here, only sons who had betrayed, and a warmaster who must be slain no matter the cost. Hands caught him. Not orc hands, not talons of a traitor primarch. Ceramite gauntlets, the bone white of sanguinary priests, the black of chaplains. Crozius' heads crashed into his helm, not to break his skull, but to stun. Injector needles slammed into armor joints, pumping a cocktail of sedatives and stabilizers into his system. He tore free. For a moment, he saw the faces around him through a haze of red. Brothers, their visors up so he could see their eyes trying to reach him. Chaplains chanting louder, 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 their words a chain thrown into a storm. Sanguinary priests weeping blood tears as they tried to pin his limbs. "Warmaster!" he roared, spittle flecking his vox grill. "Horus! Calistarius!" someone shouted, voice raw. "Brother, it is done! That battle is done!" The syringe finally bit deep enough. A cold flood rushed through his veins. The world lurched. Horus and the vengeful spirit and the dawn of the Imperium tore away like a ripped banner. The ecclesiarchy complex came back, its spires cracked, its walls crawling with orc glyphs and the bodies of the fallen. He fell to his knees. A howling emptiness opened inside him where the vision had been. "All right," the Death Company chaplain said quietly, standing over him with Crozius raised. "We have you." They painted his armor black. He did not remember the journey back to the Blood Angels' encampment. He did not remember being stripped of his warplate, the red washed away, the helms and pauldrons and breastplates submerged in sacred oils and midnight pigments, while chaplains chanted and sanguinary priests watched with hollow eyes. He had fleeting impressions only, hands moving with ritual precision, brushes tracing ancient symbols upon ceramite, the sting of fresh cuts on his skin as they wrote litanies in his blood. When his senses cleared, he stood among the death company. Their laughter and sobbing and raving roars crashed over him in a constant tide. Each of them was lost in the same vision that had claimed him, each trapped forever in the Primarch's last stand. He saw them as both brothers and ghosts, living men already half in the tower of Amareo beneath Baal's surface, dead in all but fact. The chaplain paced before them, Crozius held high. "Sons of Sanguinius," he thundered, "you know why you are here. You remember more clearly than any of us what our father suffered. You wear his death in your eyes. Today, you will make that memory a weapon. Today, upon this cursed world, you will be his wrath." Their answering howl shook dust from the shattered arches. Calistarius added his voice. He could not help it. The name of Horus was a wound in his mouth. He wanted nothing more than to find the traitor and drive his blade through that towering chest again and again until nothing was left. The fact that Horus was long dead and his body annihilated upon the vengeful spirit meant nothing to the madness. They charged. The final assault on the ecclesiarchy stronghold was beyond words, even for a mind trained to catalogue and recall with perfect clarity. The Death Company hurled themselves into a storm of fire. Orc guns chattered, big shooters stitched lines of tracer across the broken courtyards. Rockets howled down like vengeful comets, turning squads into ragged heaps of twisted metal and broken bodies. Artillery from Imperial lines crashed in as well, their barrages walking dangerously close to friendly forces. The order had been given. The ecclesiarchy complex would be retaken or burned. Either outcome served the Imperium. In the overlapping crossfire of greenskin rage and human desperation, Hades' hive shook. Calistarius felt none of it as fear. Every shell burst was just another flash from the War Master's armor. Every ringing impact against his plate was another blow traded in a duel that had echoed across millennia. Orcs loomed before him and died, their tusked faces wearing for an instant the helm of a traitor legionary, the sneer of a fallen son of terror. He waded through, them like a scythe cutting rotten wheat. Psychic power flared wild and uncontrolled. He did not shape it into precise bolts or shields as he had upon Baal or within the sin of damnation. It erupted from him in waves, crushing bodies, hurling greenskins into walls hard enough to break them, snapping crude vehicles in half as if they were made of glass. His force sword was a bright arc, but he barely needed it. His hands were enough. His will was enough. Somewhere, far away, someone was screaming his name, begging him to pull back, to rein in, to remember. He did not. The cathedral heart of the complex loomed ahead, its towers cracked, its once magnificent statues defaced, its main doors a charred ruin, forced open by orc demolition charges. The Death Company crashed against it, clawing their way up smashed steps under the fire of greenskins who had dug in among the shattered pews and toppled altars. It was a killing ground, and they were the killers and the killed. The end came, with a sound like the sky breaking. Orc artillery found the range at the same moment as Imperial guns overshot by a breath. Shells from both directions hammered into the ancient masonry. Vaults that had stood since the earliest years of the Imperium groaned under the impact. Cracks spidered through load-bearing columns. Stained glass that had somehow survived the initial invasion exploded in showers of lethal colour. Calistarius looked up, just for an instant, and saw the fresco above the nave. It showed an angel dying. Sanguinius, painted in idealized glory, lay beneath Horus's shadow, wings torn, blood spilling. The artist had rendered the Primarch's face as serene even in death, eyes turned heavenward. The War Master loomed above, weapon raised, the moment just before triumph captured forever. The ceiling split down the middle. The world became noise and falling stone. A column as wide as a hab block sheared in half, plummeting. Roof segments broke free and crashed down in vast slabs, smashing pews and orcs and angels alike. Dust roared through the cathedral, a physical thing, thick and choking. Calistarius felt something heavy strike his back, drive him to his knees, then crush him flat. There was a sensation of movement, brief and terrible, as he was driven deeper into the earth by collapsing weight. For a moment, he could not tell if the screams in his ears were his or his brother's, or the echo of a long-ago angel breaking upon a War Master's fist. Darkness swallowed him. Time dissolved. He did not know, at first, that he was buried. He knew only pain and the endless replaying of Sanguinius's death. In the theatre of his mind, the golden angel rose and fell and rose again, charging the traitor, taking blow after mortal blow and refusing to die until he had wrung every last shred of meaning from his sacrifice. Each iteration cut deeper, each echo frayed something inside Calistarius further. Somewhere beyond that vision, he felt the crushing, weight of stone and twisted rebar pinning his limbs. He could not move his arms. His legs were numb. His armor was a crushed shell, life support systems flickering, servos locked. His vox was dead. No light reached him. There was only the memory and the rage it birthed. He lost track of how many times he killed Horus and was killed by him. On one cycle, he became aware of other voices. They were not those of chaplains or brothers. They were not the pure, agonizing note of Sanguinius or the thunder of the War Master. They slid between those extremes like snakes in high grass, soft, coaxing tones, laughter that held neither joy nor honest malice, but a kind of hungry curiosity. You do not have to suffer, they suggested. You could end this. Let go. Let us help you. He recognized them for what they were. The warp was thick with such things. He had fought demons in the sin of damnation, heard their shrieks from the other side of reality. Here they came in whispers, sweet as poisoned. Wine. Give us the rage, one voice murmured, seeming to come from within his own skull. We will shape it for you. We will make of you a weapon that will never break. No more doubt, no more failure, only victory, only blood. Khorne's laughter rumbled at the edges of that promise, all slaughter and mindless fury. Tzeentch's sly amusement threaded through it, delighted at the chance for another bargain. Slaanesh offered endless ecstasy in the kill, Nurgle a release from pain in rot and oblivion. He rejected them, one by one, not because he was pure, not because he feared damnation. He already felt damned, his soul stretched thin over too many visions. No, he refused them out of something colder, something like pride. I am my father's son, he hissed in the dark, teeth grinding. If I become a monster, it will be my own doing, not yours. The black rage roared at that. Within his mind, it took form at last. No longer just a replayed memory, but a thing in its own right, a figure made of shadow and blood, with wings like broken swords and a face that was and was not Sanguinius's. Its eyes were pits of starless night. Its teeth were all the deaths of the blood angels, past and future, grinding together. You are mine, it told him. Without words, you were always mine. They fought, not with blades, not with fists, but with will. It drove the vision of the vengeful spirit into him again, faster now, more brutal, stripping away any nuance or nobility, leaving only the raw wound of betrayal. It tried to drown him in it, to make that single moment the only reality he could know. He clung to details, to the memory of Baal's red sands under his feet as a youth, to the steel echo of the sin of damnation's corridors, the way the genestealers moved in the dark, to the faces of brothers whose names were already carved into the sarcophagi deep beneath the fortress monastery, to Raphael's hand on his shoulder at Hades' wall, dragging him back from the brink. He forced those things between himself and the shadow angel's onslaught like wedges. The entity shrieked, unable to comprehend resistance that did not come from denial, but from a refusal to surrender precious pain and precious love alike. It wanted to hollow him out and fill him only with Sanguinius's death. He refused. He would keep the death, yes, but he would keep other things too. The days bled into one another. Outside, Armageddon continued to burn. Orcs died in windrows under the guns of Hades. Guardsmen fed into the breach at the Ecclesiarchy complex until the rubble ran slick. Astartes fell by the score fighting in other hives, other continents. Titans duelled in the ash wastes. The hive world's fate was written in fire. Calistarius knew nothing of it beyond distant pressure in the warp. His war was here, in the dark, against his own blood and the thing that had waited in it since the War Master's betrayal. On the seventh night, though he did not know it as such until later, something broke. Not him. Not entirely. The black rage hurled itself at him one last time, wearing the angel's face, wings torn, eyes mad. It offered him the relief of surrender, the sweet simplicity of seeing only one battle forever. For a heartbeat, he wanted it. To let go of choice and doubt, and the crushing knowledge of a galaxy in endless agony. To live and die in that throne room, in that single perfect act of defiance. He almost yielded. Then he remembered the Death Company, black-armoured brothers howling Sanguinius's name as they threw themselves into the guns. He remembered their broken glory and their doomed honesty. If he joined them, truly joined them, there would be one fewer mind left to bear witness, one fewer voice to argue, one fewer blade to turn that madness into something that served more than its own need to repeat. No, he said. The word was a spark in the dark, small but real. He fed it every memory he had, every scar, every smallest vestige of individuality. The spark became a flame, then a blaze, then a roaring column of fire that consumed the shadow angel from within. The black rage did not die. It could not. It was woven too deep into his gene seed, into the psychic echo of a Primarch's death. But he bound it. He wrapped it in chains of his own making and dragged it down into the deepest pit of his soul. Not gone, never gone, but caged. At the same moment, far more mundane chains broke. Something in his crushed armour gave way with a groan. Servo pistons that had been frozen sparked, juddered, and then, very slowly, moved. Calistarius felt weight shift above him as slab stones cracked and rebar bent. He drew in a breath thick with dust and the taste of centuries of incense and started to push. Pain lit every nerve in his body. Bones grated, torn muscles screamed. He did not care. He pushed. Stone cracked. Masonry shifted. Statues that had toppled in the collapsed ground against one. Another, as they were forced aside by an impossible will. Little avalanches of rubble slid, then greater ones, light, thin and dirty, stabbed down from somewhere far above. He roared, wordless, his voice a jagged thing that shook dust from the fractured vaults. With one final effort, he thrust his hands upward, fingers exploding from the cathedral floor in a shower of shattered flagstones. He clawed at the ruin, dragging his helm free, then his shoulders, then his torso, until at last he wrenched himself out of his rocky tomb and collapsed on his hands and knees amid the wreckage. The air he sucked in tasted of ash, burnt propellant, and distant Prometheum fires. The night sky over Hades burned a dull, poisonous red. The Ecclesiarchy complex was a charnel ruin, its once proud towers reduced to jagged silhouettes against the polluted stars. Bodies lay everywhere, orc and human and Astartes, crushed by stone, torn by shrapnel, twisted in death. He rose. His armour was ruined, plates shattered, servos exposed. Black paint scoured away in places to reveal bare metal and the underlying red. His psychic hood hung in mangled tatters. He should not have been able to move. Yet he stood, swaying, and looked around at the grave that had been his womb for 7 nights. Something had changed in the warp. It lay quieter around him now, in an awful way. The screams were still there. Armageddon still burned. But where once the black rage had been a constant roar in his ears, it was now a low growl, caged and snarling behind bars of his own making. He felt its weight in him, coiled and waiting, but it did not own him. Calistarius. The name drifted through his thoughts like dust. It did not fit. He was that warrior still, and he was not. He was the librarian who had walked Baal's librarium, and the Death Company madman who had seen only Horus in every foe, and something other besides, something that had stared into the abyss of his blood's curse and refused to blink. He laughed once, a harsh, broken sound, the first laughter that Grave had heard since the world began. Then, unarmed, half buried in the ruin of a dead cathedral, he turned toward the sound of distant orc voices in the shattered streets of Hades' Hive and began to walk. The first orc saw him as a prize. It was a big creature by the standards of its breed, shoulders thick with stolen plating, a chain of human skulls rattling at its belt. It clambered through the broken arch of the fallen cathedral, boots crunching over shards of stone and shattered icons, its small malicious eyes scanning the ruin for salvage and survivors to finish. Mephiston stood alone in the dust. He was still half buried in rubble, armor split and twisted, black paint scoured away in jagged streaks. He had no weapon in his hands. His helm hung at his waist, cracked, carried by instinct rather than need. Dust streaked his pale face. His eyes were dark. The orc saw a broken Astartes and roared in delight. Others answered. More shapes lumbered through the wreckage, crude armor clanking, blades and clubs and pistols waving as they jeered in their brutish tongue. A warband of survivors from the ecclesiarchy slaughter, scavengers drawn by the promise of loot and a last satisfying kill. "Hew me, angel," the lead orc bellowed, mangled low Gothic thick on its tongue. "Dis one still twitches. We crump it good." They came at him, a knot of green skin and noise. Mephiston moved. It was not the measured stride he had known as Calistarius, not the controlled advance of a disciplined librarian. It was something else. The world seemed to slow as he stepped forward. Each orc footfall, each clank of metal, each ragged breath became a distinct event, suspended for his inspection. The warp burned around him, not as a distant storm, but as a furnace pouring through the cracks of his being. He crossed the distance in a heartbeat. His hand closed around the first orc's throat. Bone and cartilage gave way under his grip with a sharp, ugly crack. He flung the body aside before gravity had decided which way it would fall, using it as a battering ram to smash into the green skin behind it. Two more lunged, cleavers raised. He stepped inside the arc of their blows, driving his elbow into one gnarled jaw, feeling teeth shatter, then snapped his boot up into the second orc's knee, folding it backwards and dropping the beast screaming. Something broke inside him as he fought, and it was not bone. Power surged, raw and unshaped. The air around him trembled. Invisible force lashed out at his unspoken command, catching an orc mid-charge and simply crushing it downward into the rubble, armor and flesh collapsing in on themselves, as if some giant hand had closed around them. Dust fountained. Another greenskin flew sideways, hurled against a fallen column hard enough to leave a crater. They never had time to understand. To the orcs, he was suddenly everywhere. A blur of blackened armor and pale, inhuman features, his movements too swift to follow. Every time a cleaver or jagged blade came close, it met empty air or the unyielding plate of his ruined war gear. His hands were killing tools, fingers gouging, twisting, breaking, his will reaching out to snap spines and stop hearts without ever touching them. He felt none of the exhilaration that had howled through him in the Death Company charge. This was not Sanguinius's last battle replayed. This was quiet, cold killing. The shadow angel he had chained inside him stirred, pressing against its bonds, tasting the blood in the air, but he did not let it free. He drew just enough of its fury to fuel his blows and no more, a man dipping his hands into a volcano and refusing to fall in. The last of the lesser orcs died trying to run. He closed his hand, and the creature jerked in mid-leap, limbs spasming. It dropped bonelessly, neck twisted, eyes staring at nothing. Silence settled, broken only by the grumble of shifting stones and distant gunfire from the greater war still raging across Hades. A shadow fell across him. The war boss was enormous, even for a greenskin. It pushed through the smashed archway with the careless force of a living tank, ripping aside blocks of masonry that would have taken a team of servitors to shift. Its armour was a patchwork of looted plates, some still bearing the Aquila or other imperial sigils, crudely defaced with glyphs and crude trophies. A shield generator hooked from some fallen noble's personal suit crackled across its chest. In one massive claw, it held a hammer that had once been a loyal servant weapon, now desecrated and repurposed. It took in the scene in a glance. The broken cathedral, the bodies of its boys strewn like discarded toys, the lone figure standing amidst them with empty hands. "'Dis yours, den," it rumbled. Its voice shook dust from the broken vaults. "All dis killing, good fight." It laughed, a booming, ugly sound that had nothing of humour in it. "Now we fight," it said. "Just us, you and me." Mephiston said nothing. The war boss came at him in a charging thunder of steps, hammer arcing down with enough force to flatten a battle tank. The shadow of the blow fell across Mephiston's face, the corrupted weapon humming with stolen power. He stepped in, not away. His world narrowed to a single instant. The air peeled back from the hammer's descent. He felt the warp surge up through him, informing every muscle, every tendon, every sliver of bone. He placed his boot to one side, shifting his weight a fraction, letting the hammer glance off a shattered column instead of his skull. Stone exploded behind him. At the same time, he drove his fist forward. Ceramite met crude plate with a sound like a cracking shell. The war boss's chest armor crumpled. He felt ribs splinter under the impact. He did not stop. His fist drove deeper, propelled by unnatural strength, by the caged fury of the black rage turned into a spear point. For a heartbeat, they were locked like that, the orc's massive frame shuddering, its free hand clawing for him, then all strength left the creature. He withdrew his hand. The war boss swayed. Its hammer slipped from numb fingers. Green blood poured down its front in a sheet. The light went out of its piggish eyes. It toppled backwards, hitting the rubble with a crash that sent a small avalanche tumbling from the broken arches above. Mephiston stood over it, armor slick with alien blood. He looked like a statue carved from night and slaughter. Breathing slowly, the warp still a roaring tide just beneath his skin. He turned away without a word. The walk back to Imperial lines took an eternity, measured in heartbeats and gunfire. Hades' hive had been a cathedral to industry once. Now it was a mausoleum. Streets that had once borne the tread of billions were choked with rubble and corpses. Whole hab blocks lay on their sides, snapped from their foundations and thrown into mad angles by bombardment. Fire guttered from ruptured promethium lines. The air was a soup of smoke and ash and promethium fumes that would have killed a mortal in minutes. Mephiston walked through it like a shadow. Orc patrols stumbled upon him in the maze of ruin. None lived long enough to report. Some he broke with his hands, snapping necks, smashing skulls, hurling bodies aside. Others he simply looked at, letting the unleashed pressure of his mind crush them where they stood, eyes rolling white as their crude brains tore themselves apart under psychic assault. He moved on, leaving silence where there had been noise. At last, the shattered outline of the Imperial perimeter loomed through the murk. The walls were pitted and scorched, studded with fresh repair plates. Heavy guns jutted from casemates like the teeth of some wounded beast. Guard banners hung tattered, stained with smoke and blood, their colours barely visible. Beneath the grime, figures lined the parapets, some hunched over weaponry, others slumped in exhaustion. Shouts rose as he approached. "Contact! Movement in the kill zone!" Laser guns swung to bear. Heavy bolter barrels tracked. For the men on the wall, he was just a shape at first, a figure in black, moving with a steady, unhurried gait through a landscape where anything that moved that calmly had to be a monster. "Hold your fire," a voice snapped, sharper than the rest. "That is Astarte's plate. Stand down, you fools, or I will have your tongues for banners." Shapes dropped from the parapet, red armor flaring in the gloom. Blood angels. They came toward him across the churned ground of no man's land, stepping over corpses and craters. Their armor was battle-scarred but intact, the red of their chapter dulled by dust and soot. Their helms were on, lenses burning, weapons at low ready. Sanguinary priests moved among them, their white armor stained, their chalices dark. They halted a short distance away. For a heartbeat, none spoke. Mephiston looked at them, at brothers he remembered, and brothers whose faces he did not know. Their auras burned in his new sight as bright sparks in the dark. They looked back at him and saw a figure they had buried in their minds a week ago, now standing before them, altered in ways that went far beyond ruined armor and dried blood. "Calistarius," Raphael said. The captain of the first company stepped forward, helm maglocked at his belt, bare head streaked with grime. There was a cut across his cheek that had not yet healed, a small thing for a space marine but telling in its freshness. His one augmetic eye clicked softly as it focused. "You were dead," he said, not as accusation, but as statement. "I was," the other answered. His voice had changed. It held the same dry cadence, the echo of Baal's deserts, but there was a depth to it now, a resonance that made the air around his words shiver. "A week in the ruins," one of the sanguinary priests murmured. "Buried, no air, no supply, no communication." "And the rage," whispered another, his hand tightening on the hilt of the chainsword at his hip. "He fell to it. I saw it in his eyes when we dragged him down." The chaplain who had inducted him into the death company strode forward, Crozius raised. His black armor seemed almost dull beside Mephiston's broken plate, as if the color had been drunk from it. "What stands before us?" the chaplain asked, voice low and dangerous. "Brother or demon? The black rage does not release those it seizes. It devours them. It has done so since the heresy. Better men than you have fallen and not returned." Mephiston looked into the priest's eyes. He saw fear there, natural and honest, and under it a thread of hope the chaplain himself might not have admitted. "I fought it," he said. "In the dark, in the earth, in my own blood. It did not devour me." "Impossible," one of the priests breathed. "Yet here I stand," Mephiston replied. The warp flared around him as if to punctuate the words. Those near him flinched, not in physical pain but in instinct. His psychic presence was no longer the disciplined, distant flame they remembered from the librarian Calistarius. It was a bonfire, a blazing, barely contained inferno. Their own lesser senses recoiled from it. Raphael closed his remaining organic eye briefly, then opened it again. "Whatever he is," the captain said, "he killed orcs to reach us. I can smell their blood on him, even over this battlefield." He lifted his chin. "We will not decide his fate here, in the mud and ruins. Lord Dante will judge." So they took him from Armageddon and brought him home. Baal's skies had not changed. The world was still red, still wound-scarred, still dying slowly beneath a poisoned sun. The fortress monastery was still a knife in the heavens, its silhouette unchanged against the void. But for Mephiston, the return was a crossing between lives. They tested him. The apothecarian turned its full array of instruments upon his body. Gene scans and chemical assays, blood work and organ readings, all taken with the intensity usually reserved for relics. They confirmed the truth. Calistarius had died under the cathedral's fall. His heart had stopped. His brain had flatlined. His secondary organs had failed. For days, his body had been in the grey borderland between death and oblivion. Yet here he was, walking, speaking, killing. The librarium turned its arts upon his mind. Psychana probes that would have flayed a mortal's thoughts to rags slid over him and found only resistance and depth. They searched for demonic taint and found none, though the shadow of something vast and angry coiled at the edge of their perception, like a storm glimpsed on the horizon. He endured it all in silence. Lord Dante himself spoke with him in the great Strategium, the two figures facing one another under statues of Sanguinius, rendered in marble and gold. Raphael stood at the captain's right hand. The chaplain, who had doubted at the wall, stood at the left. Other senior officers watched, some openly, some from behind privacy screens. "What are you, brother?" Dante asked at last. "Your chief librarian," came the answer, calm and inexorable. There was a murmur at that. Technically, he still held the rank of mere lexicanium. There were others more senior, more experienced, but none of them had crawled out of their own grave with their curse chained inside their chest. "Callisterius is dead," Mephiston continued, meeting Dante's gaze. "He died on Hades' hive. What came from the tomb is other. I have power now I could not have imagined before. I see the warp as a living thing. I feel our father's death as a constant drumbeat. I will turn these things into weapons for the chapter, or you may kill me now if you doubt. I can." Dante studied him for a long time. At last, the chapter master inclined his head. "Very well," he said. "You have walked the valley of the shadow and returned. You are death to our enemies and a knife at our own throat. If we are to survive this age, we must learn to live with such blades. You will take a new name, as befits your rebirth." There was an old word in Baelite, half forgotten. Mephiston. It meant the spirit that walks beneath the dunes at night, the thing that comes for the dying when even carrion birds refuse to land. The Lord of Death. He took it without hesitation. The years that followed blurred into blood and fire. As Mephiston, he grew into the role he had claimed. His psychic might dwarfed anything the chapter had seen since the dark days of the heresy. On one orc war world, he strode alone into the path of a ponderous battle wagon bristling with guns and crude rockets, and stopped it dead without touching it, crushing its frame into a twisted lump of metal under the force of his will. On another, he faced a coven of enemy psychers across a howling battlefield, and simply looked at them, watching as their minds overloaded and burned out one by one, their corpses collapsing into twitching heaps. He read the lines of war as easily as others read scripture. On countless worlds, he directed orbital bombardments with a gesture, his inner sight tracing the movement of enemy regiments and Xeno swarms across continents. He predicted enemy warlord gambits before they were conceived, placing his brothers in just the right positions to turn certain defeat into slaughterous ambush. Hundreds of billions died in those wars, enemies of the Imperium reduced to ash and bone, but also civilians caught in the crossfire, guard regiments sacrificed as pawns. He did not flinch. Death was his vocation now. The librarian could not deny such power. He rose through its ranks with unnatural speed, not by politicking or favour, but by simple, overwhelming ability. Librarians who had once considered themselves his mentors found themselves standing aside as he took command in battle after battle, his presence on the field tipping scales that would otherwise have remained grimly balanced. In time, even the most conservative minds accepted the inevitable. Mephiston was named Chief Librarian of the Blood Angels. Among the rank and file, he became a figure spoken of in hushed voices. For some, he was hope made flesh, proof that the black rage could be conquered, that the flaw was not an absolute sentence. On Sanguinala, pilgrims pointed to his image in bas relief and whispered prayers that the angel's favour might still linger, that one day the curse might be broken for all. For others, he was a walking horror. They watched the way his eyes darkened when the battle sang too sweetly. They felt the pressure of his presence when he walked past, the way weaker minds struggled to hold on to themselves. They whispered of the Black Angel, a shadow figure in the warp that looked like Sanguinius if one blurred one's eyes, and imagined the Primarch had never chosen death, but had embraced wrath instead. They wondered if Mephiston was that thing's jailer or its host. He did not correct them. In the quiet moments, few and far between, he meditated in the depths of the librarium, surrounded by wards and silence. The caged rage inside him moved like a great beast, restless, hungry. Sometimes he spoke to it, not in words but in impressions. It offered release. He offered it purpose, an uneasy pact. On Solon V, the ruinous powers came calling openly. The planet had been a forge world once, its crust riddled with mines and manufactoria. In the latter years of the 41st millennium, it became a battlefield. Chaos forces fell upon it, led by a demon prince whose name had already scarred other histories. Makar. In the crystal caves of Solon V's deep strata, the demon laid its trap. Mephiston descended into those caverns at the head of a strike force, the walls around them glittering with veins of quartz and stranger materials, the air cold and thin. Echoes multiplied, footsteps coming back as overlapping phantoms. The warp tasted thin here, stretched, as if the matter of the world was somehow closer to the immaterium. They were ambushed, not by simple cultists or warp-twisted beasts, but by the fabric of reality itself. The light fractured, space folded. Brothers vanished mid-step, swallowed by rifts that yawned and snapped shut like jaws. Mephiston felt the trap close around him, flared his power in defiance, and still the floor dropped away. He landed hard, alone. The cavern around him was wrong. The crystals were too sharp, too bright, angles that hurt the eye to follow. Colours shifted without moving. The air smelled of rust and incense and old blood. At the far end of the chamber, a shape unfolded from the shadows, vast and terrible, built of horn and wing and too many eyes, each one a window into a different, sickening vista. Lord of Death, Makar said. Its voice was every voice he had heard in the dark under Hades, and others besides. It was the chuckle of a carrion bird, and the whisper of a confidant, the bellow of a warlord, and the coo of a lover, all layered, all wrong. You have walked far since Armageddon, the demon continued. You have tasted what it is to be more than mortal, more than Astartes. You are already half ours. Mephiston straightened, dust falling from his armour. I am no one's but my own, he said. Makar laughed. The cavern trembled. You caged the black rage, it said. Impressive. You took the Primarch's death scream and made it your chain. You think that makes you free? No, little angel. It makes you a vessel. You have carved out a palace inside yourself for powers you pretend to despise. It paced, talons clicking on crystal that did not crack. Come with me, the demon said. Embrace what you have already become. Cast aside these petty loyalties to a corpse on a throne and a dead angel. Join us as a prince, and I will show you how to turn that caged beast in your heart into a god. Whole worlds will die screaming your name. You will be salvation to those who embrace you and annihilation to those who do not. Either way, you will be worshipped. It raised an armoured claw, offering, almost gentle. Mephiston watched it for a time. Images flickered across his inner vision. Worlds burning. Yes, but not as they burn now. Burning under a sky of warp fire, with his own face towering above them in impossible proportion, eyes like suns, voice a storm. He saw blood angels falling to their knees, not in prayer to the Emperor, but to him, their Lord of Death, made God of Death. The shadow angel in his soul stirred, hungry. He smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. You mistake me, he said. Makar tilted its horned head. You think I fight the rage because I am afraid of power, Mephiston went on. Because I fear damnation. Because I cling to some childish notion of purity. That is what you offer me, is it not? Power without restraint, glory without conscience, rage without chains. Exactly, the demon purred. Mephiston moved. In the crystal light, he was a streak of red and black. He crossed the cavern in a heartbeat, psychic force exploding from him in a wave that spiderwebbed the crystalline walls and made the warped air shriek. His hand closed around Makar's throat. The demon reeled, more surprised than hurt. No mortal, Not even an Astartes should have been able to lay hands on it so easily in its own chosen ground. It clawed at him, talons scraping over his armor, leaving burning lines, but he did not break his grip. "You think I restrain the black rage because I am weak," he said, voice a low growl. "You are wrong. I do it because I choose to, because I will not. Let even my damnation serve any master but my will." He tightened his fingers. Makar choked. Warp light bled from its eyes and mouth. It tried to shift, to dissolve into mist, to vent itself through cracks in reality, but Mephiston's will pinned it. He poured all the cold, conquered fury of Hades into that grip, all the strength he had gleaned from 7 nights under stone. "You want to know what I am?" he whispered. "I am the thing that looked at the abyss in my blood and decided to use it as a mirror. I am the one son of Sanguinius who refuses to die the way you want us to." He squeezed. The cavern filled with a sound that was not sound at all. A psychic scream that rattled the bones of the world. The crystals shuddered. Cracks opened in the air. Makar's form convulsed, frame collapsing in on itself as if an invisible hand crushed it. For an instant, its true shape showed through the glamour. A knot of hatred, a skein of broken oaths and butchered souls. Then he broke it. The demon imploded, torn out of the material realm not by binding or banishment rites, but by sheer, overwhelming force. The backlash hurled Mephiston to his knees, armor scorched, mind ringing. When he raised his head again, the cavern was different. The angles were merely angles. The light was merely light. The warp stench had faded to a sour aftertaste. He stood, swaying, and spat blood. "Be your own monster," he told the empty air. "Or be someone else's. I have made my choice." The centuries that followed polished that choice into legend and threat. On a shrine world in the galactic east, his arrival turned a losing battle into a massacre. The traitor warband that had been carving its sigils into the basilica walls found their champions crushed under falling statues, their demon hosts shrieking as Mephiston ripped them from their mortal shells. In the aftermath, the faithful painted his likeness alongside Sanguinius's, a dark angel standing beside a bright one, death and hope in uneasy alliance. On a forge world consumed by rebellion, he walked through manufactoria halls filled with heretic engines and turned them off with a thought, machine spirits howling as he stilled them. The rebels broke and ran, only to find no gate unlocked, no transport available. He had closed those too. The purge that followed was total.
Please support the channel and check out the link below for the best merch.
On Holonon, he faced the Great Devourer again. The world's hives rose like mountains of steel and stone, their summits lost in smog. At first, Mephiston and his strike force believed they faced a simple uprising. The banners of the Adeptus were torn down, replaced with crude sigils. Loyal officials were nailed to transit spines. Cultists chanted in the underhives. Then he felt it. Not the scattered feral hunger of isolated genestealers, but the focused, distant pressure of a hive fleet's will. Kraken, or something like it. A tendril reaching. By the time the last of the cult's patriarchs lay dead, it was too late. Spore clouds darkened the sky. Mycetic pods screamed down, punching through void shields that had not been designed to face such an onslaught. The first of the great beasts hit the ground hard enough to crack hab blocks, roaring, their talons scything, their carapaces shedding the first tentative shots like rain. Mephiston gathered what troops he could. They fell back toward a chapel atop one of the mid-hive levels, a small, stubborn island of sanctity in a sea of rust and stone. Guardsmen, Arbites, a handful of surviving Astartes from his force, Sanctuary's children, all packed into the shattered nave around him. Outside, the Tyranids came. He stood in the doorway. His sword burned in his hand, wreathed in psychic flame. His other hand was empty and terrible. Every beast that charged the steps cracked under invisible blows, their bodies thrown back into the seething mass behind them. Smaller creatures died in clusters, their minds shredded. Larger ones staggered, as he hammered their joints with telekinetic impact, forcing them to climb over their own dead. The defenders behind him fought like men already at their own funerals. They saw the tide and knew they could not hold it. Yet as long as the black-haired angel at the door remained standing, they found they could not bring themselves to fall back. His presence seared them, burned away fear, and left only a kind of fierce, hopeless joy. To die here, on this threshold, under that gaze, seemed almost enough. A massive form rose from the swarm, a burrowing horror, all talons and muscle and carapace reared up, its bulk blotting out what remained of the sky. It smashed into the chapel front, jaws opening to roar. Mephiston met it. He leapt, every muscle and servo straining, his will hurling him higher than any jump pack could have carried him. He drove his sword down, biting deep, psychic energy crackling along its length. For a moment, man and monster were locked, the trigon thrashing, the chapel shuddering under the impact. The beast twisted, slamming its weight sideways. Stone cracked. Support pillars shattered. The chapel roof caved in. Dust and rubble engulfed them. The defenders lost sight of their Lord of Death, seeing only falling stone and the writhing silhouette of the wounded beast. They roared and charged, even as the structure collapsed, inspired by the sight of him vanishing under that impossible weight a second time. Whether he lived or died, they would make his burial a mound of alien corpses. Later, historians would argue details. Some would say he perished there and returned by miracle. Others would insist he walked from the ruin as he had from Hades, his armor in tatters, his eyes brighter. The truth mattered less than the story. Across the galaxy, a pattern took shape. Where Mephiston walked, enemies of the Imperium died in droves. Worlds were saved, their skies cleared, their hives purged. Other worlds were written off as too far gone, his presence there less a reprieve than a final confirmation that no more aid would be coming. If the Lord of Death could not turn the tide, none could. His name became a prophecy, a promise, and a threat. To the enemies of mankind, it meant annihilation, their plans turned to ash by a single black-clad figure whose eyes held a caged storm. To his own brothers, it meant hope that perhaps their curse could be mastered, and fear that maybe the price of such mastery was to become something only barely still on their side. Either way, when word came that Mephiston, chief librarian of the Blood Angels, walked a given front, every soul there knew one thing. Death had already chosen that world. The only question was for whom. The rumours came on vox wings and pilgrim tongues, and they hurt. They spoke of a world called Cybele, where blood angels fought the despoilers of chaos in the dust of ancient cathedra. They spoke of a shrine world named Sabian, where relics of the angel were said to lie entombed beneath mountains of carved stone and martyr bone. And they spoke most of all of a brother named Archeo, who walked those battlefields with the sacred spear of Telesto in his hand and light on his brow. They called him Reborn. In the Librarian of Baal, Mephiston listened to the reports like knives drawn across old scars. The chamber was quiet, save for the whisper of reciters and the rustle of parchment. Hololithic projectors showed Sabian's shrine cities as ghostly sketches, their towers like fingers reaching for a sky stained with incense smoke and orbital fire. Icons flickered, marking the movements of Blood Angels companies sent to support Archeo's campaigns. Some of those icons had peeled away from their prior chains of command, circling the new beacon like moths to a flame. His warriors took the field against the Black Legion on Cybele, one of the attendant librarians read, voice steady but eyes uneasy. They say his presence turned the battle that traitor Astartes faltered when they beheld him. They speak of wings of light, of a halo like Sanguinius's upon his head. Others shifted, armor creaking. Pilgrim accounts, another scoffed softly. They would see the Emperor's face in rust stains on a shrine floor if you let them. Not only pilgrims, the first insisted. Our brothers speak of miracles, of the spear of Telesto burning bright in his hands, of wounds closing under his gaze. They all looked, eventually, to Mephiston. He stood apart, as he always did, framed in the shadow of a carved sanguinius. The stone Primarch loomed above him, wings spread, sword downturned. Mephiston's red armor seemed darker than usual in the half-light. The psychic hood a wreath of metal and cabling around his skull. His eyes were closed. He did not need them to see. In his inner sight, the rumors were not words, but colors and lines. The warp around Cybele and Sabian was disturbed, not in the wild, brutish fashion of a demonic incursion, nor the mindless hunger of the great devourer, but in subtle, shifting patterns, like currents diverted around a stone that had no right to be there. Archeo, he thought, tasting the name. A blood angel, true-born, a warrior of the chapter, a bearer of one of its most sacred relics, a brother claiming to be his own father's reincarnation. At that, the caged thing in his soul stirred. The black rage pressed against its bonds, interested, tasting the idea. What would it be to walk the galaxy wearing Sanguinius's face without suffering his death? Was such a thing salvation or blasphemy beyond words? Mephiston opened his eyes. The reports are not lies, he said. Something walks Cybele and Sabian that wears our father's shadow. Whether that is truly an echo of Sanguinius, or something that feeds on our need for one, is another question. And if it is the latter, the senior librarian asked quietly, then we are already at war, Mephiston replied. Lord Dante received him in the Strategium, as he had on the day Mephiston claimed his new name. The chapter master stood before a hololithic display of Sabian, the shrine world rendered in cold light. Cities of basilica and reliquary spread across its surface like scabs of stone, linked by pilgrim roads and guarded by orbital defenses that gleamed faintly. Icons marked Blood Angels' forces under Archeo's banner and those that still answered directly to Baal. The pattern was not yet open schism, but the lines of fracture were clear. You know what they say, Dante said without preamble, that Archeo bears our father's spirit, that the spear of Telesto has awoken something in him, that Sanguinius walks again. His voice held no awe, only weariness. I know, Mephiston said. You remember what nearly broke us at Cygnus. You have seen what false angels can do to our blood. Dante's jaw clenched. If these rumors are true, we stand on a blade's edge. If they are false, we stand on a precipice. Either way, Mephiston said, we cannot ignore them. Dante turned from the hololith, his gaze sharpening. You would go, he said. Yes, because you are chief librarian, and this is a warp matter, or because you fell to the black rage and returned, and you cannot bear the thought that another has cheated death with cleaner hands. Mephiston almost smiled. Does it matter why, my lord, if the work must be done? Dante's lips thinned. You are a knife, he said. Useful and dangerous to hold. I will not pretend I am comfortable sending you into a situation where a wrong cut might spill our chapter's blood across a shrine world, but I see no one else who might look upon Archeo and see more than what they need to see. Only witch sight will pierce this, Mephiston said. If Archeo's light is true, I will bend the knee beside our brothers and rejoice. If it is not, I will reveal the rot. Better that one angel bears the hate of many than that the chapter be eaten alive from within. Silence stretched. In it, Mephiston felt Dante weigh more than military calculus. The chapter master had to consider trust and loyalty and the morale of 1,000 warriors who already fought under another's name on distant worlds. At last, he gave a short nod. You will take the Europe, he said. You will assemble a force you trust. You will go to Sabian and Cybele and look upon this reborn angel with your own eyes. Then you will send me truth, however much it hurts. He stepped closer. And hear me, Mephiston, Dante said, voice low. If you find heresy, you will not make martyrs lightly. Remember that our gene line is frayed. The wrong blow in the wrong place could break it. I remember, Mephiston said. Dante's gaze flickered for a heartbeat to the psychic hood. I wonder if you do, he murmured. Go, take the Europae. Bring us back our future, or its corpse. The warship cut through the warp like a spear. On its bridge, Mephiston stood among mortal officers and servitors, watching the roiling unreality beyond the forward screens. His mind walked ahead of the hull, tracing currents and eddies that only his kind could perceive. Sabian's spiritual gravity tugged at him, a knot of faith and blood. Something else tugged from the same direction, a twisted echo, like a reflection in a warped mirror. When they burst back into real space, the shrine world filled the void. It was beautiful in its way. Oceans of white stone spread across its continents. Cities built not for industry or war, but for worship. Cathedral spires reached for the heavens in ranks, each a spear of prayer. Vox traffic crowded the channels, pilgrims chanting, priests proclaiming, while above it all the Europae and its escort flotilla took up orbit beside other Blood Angels' craft. Mephiston descended with a chosen cadre, veteran sergeants, warriors whose loyalty had been tested in a dozen wars, librarians who had fought beside him in the sin of damnation and the shield of Baal, chaplains whose faith was iron, whose duty was to keep watch even on him. Sabian's air tasted of incense and smoke from sanctified Prometheum. The shrine city of St. Sabian herself rose around the landing zone, a tangle of cloisters and plazas and reliquary towers carved from stone that had been touched by pilgrims' hands for centuries. Banners of the Blood Angels hung from the highest spires, crackling in the wind. Waiting at the foot of the steps was a man in inquisitorial black. Remius Stile bowed, just enough to avoid offence. His rosette glimmered at his throat. His face was ascetic, features lean, eyes sharp and dark. His aura, to the naked eye, was that of a loyal servant of the throne, the sort of man who had burned alien nests and witch covens across dozens of worlds. Mephiston saw the rot under the paint. The warp smell around Stele was subtle, a faint tang of corruption masked under layers of sanctioned psychana. It clung to him like the residue of incense clings to altar cloths, hard to separate from the legitimate smell. Small things gave it away. The too precise rhythms of his heart. The way the currents of the immaterium seemed to bend around his presence rather than flow past it. Inquisitor, Mephiston said, descending the ramp. His voice was cordial enough, but cold. Lord of Death, Stele replied, smile thin. Your arrival honours Sabian. The ecclesiarchy is aflame with rumour. They say you have come to weigh Archeo's soul on the scales of the Librarian. And you? Mephiston asked. What do you say? I say the Emperor tests us in strange ways, Stele said. If a noble soul bearing Sanguinius's blood has been chosen as a vessel for the Primarch's spirit, who are we to gainsay the will of terror? If, Mephiston echoed. Stele's eyes glittered. You are wary, the Inquisitor said. Good. Caution suits your burden. I too approach this miracle with suspicion, yet I have walked beside Archeo on the battlefield. I have watched him wield the spear of Telesto. I have seen the way our foes crumble before him and our brothers rally. I tell you this, whatever else can be said, he is a weapon against our enemies. That alone makes him precious. And if that very shine is bait on a hook? Mephiston asked softly. If some eye in the warp looks through him, rejoicing at each drop of genocide spilled in his name? Stele's smile did not falter. Then you, Chief Librarian, will surely see it, he said. That is why Dante sent you, is it not? To unmask any shadow no matter how well it hides. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the great basilica at the heart of the shrine city. Archeo awaits within, he said. Come and look upon your miracle. The basilica's interior was a forest of stone, columns carved with scenes from the Great Crusade reached up into gloom, supporting vaults painted with images of the Primarch and the Emperor. Candles burned in their thousands along the aisles, votive flames guttering in the disturbed air as Mephiston and his escort advanced. Pilgrims pressed back against the walls, dropping to their knees, whispering fervent prayers at the sight of so many angels in their midst. At the far end, before the main altar, Archeo stood. He wore armour fashioned in deliberate echo of Sanguinius's warplate, its red brighter than blood, edged in gold. White wings of metal and cloth arched from a backpack mount, not the living pinions of a Primarch, but close enough to trick the eye at a distance. In his hands, the spear of Telesto burned, its blade a lance of light that seemed to drink the shadows around it. When he turned, Mephiston felt the collective intake of breath from the gathered blood angels. Archeo's face was handsome, open, the features of a noble son of Baal. His eyes shone. A faint radiance haloed his brow. To mortal sight, and to the yearning gaze of Astartes long starved of hope, he looked enough like the statues of Sanguinius that for a heartbeat one could almost believe. Mephiston did not look with mortal sight. He opened his witch eyes and stared. The glow around Archeo was real, in a sense. Power flowed through him in streams, drawn from the warp, channeled by artifact and belief. It ran through his veins like molten gold or liquid fire. At its core, though, under the apparent purity, he saw threads of a different colour, hints of blue and amethyst, twisted and knotted, forming sigils that hurt to look at directly. Chaos, buried deep. A seed planted with exquisite care, wrapped in faith and relic strength. Tzeentch's handiwork, by the taste of it. A lie so close to truth that even the lie believed it. A puppet that did not know it danced. "Brothers," Archeo said, his voice carrying, easily through the basilica. "Welcome. You have come from Baal to witness what the Emperor has wrought." There was adoration in some faces, doubt in others, fear in more. Mephiston walked forward, every step an act of will. He stopped at the foot of the altar steps. The spear's light played across his armour. Archeo smiled down at him, and for a moment Mephiston could almost see the echo that had ensnared so many. A warrior who had bled with them, who now offered to break their curse with his very existence. "Do you see, Chief Librarian?" Archeo asked. "Do your witch eyes confirm what your brothers feel? Our father is not gone. He lives in us, as he always has, but now he lives in truth, in flesh, to lead us." Mephiston let the silence stretch. When he spoke, his voice was as cold and final as a bolter shot. "I see a good man," he said, "wearing a stolen light." The words fell like stones into a still pool. "I see a brother I would gladly have called. Comrade," he went on, "turned into a conduit for powers that only want to watch us eat ourselves. I see a seed of chaos in your soul, Archeo, buried deep, fed by that spear and by our hunger for miracles. You are not Sanguinius reborn. You are a weapon aimed at our hearts." The reaction was immediate. Some blood angels recoiled, horror on their faces. Others bared their teeth, moving hands to weapons, snarling at the perceived blasphemy. Chaplains shouted for calm. Librarians flared their own small powers, weighing Mephiston's words, feeling the tug of the warp around Archeo with new suspicion. Higher up, near one of the side transepts, Inquisitor Staley watched with a small, pleased smile. Archeo's expression froze. "Lies," he said. The word trembled, more with hurt than anger. "You have walked too long in the dark, Mephiston," he said. "Your eyes see shadows everywhere. Look again. Look at what has been wrought through me. On Sibylla the despoilers burned. On Sabian the faithful rallied. Our brothers are stronger, unified, under a true symbol. Do you think chaos offers such order?" "Chaos offers whatever suits its latest joke," Mephiston replied. "You are not its architect, Archeo. You are its victim. That is why this must end." He lifted a hand, fingers curling, psychic power gathering. A voice cut across the rising storm. "Wait." Sergeant Rayfin stepped forward from the ranks of those gathered near the nave. He was a solid figure in battle-scarred armor, his features bearing echoes of Archeo's, though harder, leaner. His eyes were human, without light or halo, but there was something in them that stopped even Mephiston for a heartbeat. Hope and pain. "Rayfin," Archeo breathed. "Brother," Rayfin said. He looked up at Mephiston, then back to his sibling. "I do not know what you are," he said, speaking to Archeo, voice steady but raw. "Miracle or monster, chosen or cursed. I know this. I grew up at your side. I bled with you. If you must fall, it should be by a hand that loved you once." He turned fully to Mephiston. "Lord of Death," he said, "let me be the one. Let me challenge him." Mephiston looked into the sergeant's mind. He expected to see confusion and divided loyalty, memories tangled with wishful thinking. Instead, he found something startlingly clear. Rayfin loved his brother, yes, and wanted desperately to believe in his claim. But under that, deeper, he held a vision of Sanguinius that owed nothing to relics or rumour. A quiet, private sense of the Primarch's nobility, born of long meditation on the angel's sacrifice. In that inner space, there was no room for falsehood. Mephiston hesitated. Fate, that cruel artist, showed him a possible path. If he struck Archeo down by his own hand, he would confirm every whisper that painted him as jealous monster, devourer of hope. If he refused to act, Chaos's seed would grow unchecked. If he allowed Rayfin to take this burden, the cut might leave a cleaner scar. He lowered his hand. "Very well," he said. "The blood of Sanguinius will judge its own. Rayfin, son of Baal, stand and be the Emperor's blade." The duel that followed was a storm contained. While Archeo and Rafin circled one another before the altar, wings and spear gleaming against Chainsward and Bolter, the shrine city outside erupted. Not all who had come to Sabian chose loyalties on the same side. Some squads of blood angels, intoxicated by Archeo's light, or terrified of losing it, moved to support him. Others, shaken by Mephiston's pronouncement, fell back in more ordered ranks around their chief librarian. Old bonds snapped, new ones formed. The tension that had stretched since Cybele finally broke. The word-bearers were ready. From the shadows of forgotten reliquaries and the undercroft tunnels beneath the basilica, they emerged, crimson and scripture-covered. Their armor blasphemous mirrors of the blood, angels' own. Cultists poured into the streets, chanting litanies to dark gods, waving stolen icons daubed with fresh blood. Bolter fire stitched across sacred plazas. Brothers who had fought under the same banner for centuries found themselves on opposite sides of barricades. Ornate statuary exploded under stray shots. Pilgrims died in droves, crushed under retreating crowds, or cut down by stray rounds, their last prayers lost in the thunder. In the warp above Sabian, something watched and feasted. Inside the basilica, the duel reached its inevitable end. Archeo fought with ferocious grace, the spear of Telesto a blur of light. Rafin was less polished, more driven by grit than by divine panache, but his blows were grounded in reality, his footwork honed by battles fought without miracles. The spear bit into his armor, shattering plates, drawing blood. His chainsword screeched along Archeo's pauldrons, sparks falling like mockery of holy candles. In the end, Rayfin found the opening he needed. He wrenched the spear from Archeo's grip in a clash that rang through the basilica like a funeral bell, then turned the relic in his hands and drove it home. The blade burned as it pierced ceramite. Archeo's eyes widened, not in fear, but in something like relief. Light burst around them. The warp shuddered. The carefully planted seed inside Archeo's soul tore free with his dying breath. A core of corrupted power seeking a new vessel. It found one ready. On the balcony overlooking the nave, Remius Stile laughed. The Inquisitor's body arched, his features distorting. The rosette at his throat cracked and fell. Flesh rippled. Feathered wings tore their way into existence, spreading in impossible geometry. The air around him warped, colours deepening into hues no human palette could name. The thing that was no longer simply stele spread its arms. "Malphalax!" Mephiston snarled, recognizing the taste from old records, from whispered warnings in the Librarian. The Lord of Change descended, a towering figure of twisting feathers and scaled flesh, each movement a dance of impossible angles. Its eyes were whirlpools of colour and mockery, its staff cracked with howling energies. "You play your part well, Blood Angels," it said, voice a chorus of 1,000 sly tones. "You kill your own for us. You spill your precious genocide on sacred ground. You divide, and we are made fat on your faith." It raised its staff. The wave that rolled out from the demon was not heat or force, but memory sharpened to a blade. Every blood angel in the basilica staggered. The black rage roared up, a tide of Sanguinius's last moments crashing through their minds. Brother turned on brother, not out of choice now, but out of enforced delirium. Helm lenses went dark as control systems failed. Chainswords revved. Bolters barked at point-blank range. Even Mephiston, who had caged his own curse, felt the bars buckle. The shadow angel inside him howled in glee. The memories that had tormented him under Hades surged back, brighter and more real than ever. The vengeful spirit's throne room unfolded around him, overlaying the basilica. Archeo's falling body became Sanguinius's, a golden blur. Malphalax's towering form became Horus's horned silhouette. He dropped to one knee, teeth bared. "No!" he hissed. The word was a whisper drowned in the roar. He fought, dragging at his chains, reinforcing them, but Malphalax's sorcery had been woven with exquisite malice. It was not simply the black rage triggered, it was the worst of it, amplified, crafted to exploit every line of psychic scar tissue in the blood angels' souls. Outside, the shrine city burned. Millions died on the fringes of the Astartes conflict, without ever knowing why angels killed each other above their heads. Word-bearers exulted, their sermons drowned by the sounds of slaughter. Cultists capered in blood-slick streets until stray bolter fire cut them down as indiscriminately as the faithful. In the nave, Mephiston lost his grip. For the second time in his existence, the black rage broke its chains and flooded him. He rose with a scream, seeing not Sabian, not Malphalax, but Horus looming over the broken form of Sanguinius. His sword flared in his hand. He hurled himself forward, seeking the War Master's throat, his every thought narrowed to that one kill. Fire met him, real fire, not memory. The spear of Telesto burned. Raphan, staggering and bloodied, had wrenched the relic free from his brother's body. He had used it already to strike at Malphalax, the blade cutting through the demon's defences with light that was not of this age. Now, in desperate inspiration, he turned the spear toward Mephiston. "Forgive me," he whispered, to a man who would not hear him. The spear's point struck Mephiston's breastplate. There was no physical penetration. The relic's power worked on different levels. Light exploded around them, a brilliant flare that outshone the demon's sorcery for a heartbeat. That light speared into Mephiston's soul, down into the pit where the shadow angel raged. Once, under Hades, he had chained the black rage alone. Now something of Sanguinius's own lingering grace reached down that chain and pulled. The shock was indescribable. For an instant he was two beings, the mad angel and the man who had caged it, both lit from within by a third presence, distant and sorrowful. The rage howled and tried to tear free. The new light burned it, not to nothing, but to something that hurt less. Mephiston dropped his sword. He collapsed, armour clanging on stone, breath gone, limp as if truly dead. The black rage receded, dragged back into the deepest dark, the bars of its cage reforged, thicker now, colder. When he woke, Sabian was quieter. Smoke still rose from its shrine towers. The basilica's roof was cracked, its murals ruined by fire and shrapnel. Bodies lay where they had fallen, in armour and out of it. The spore of Malphalax lingered, a sour taste in the warp, but the demon itself was gone, banished by the spear's fury. Rafen sat nearby, helm off, staring at nothing. "You have a talent for finding me under rubble," Mephiston rasped. The sergeant started, then turned, relief and something like dread crossing his face. "Lord," he said, "I struck you with the spear." "I recall little," Mephiston admitted. He pushed himself upright, feeling old pains and new ones. "Did you kill the demon?" "Malphalax is gone," Rafen said. "For now. Steely's body was destroyed. The word bearers routed. Our own are fewer." His voice cracked on that last word. Mephiston looked around properly and saw the cost. Brothers lay in heaps, some still wearing Archeo's sigil, others bearing only the teardrop of the chapter. The distinction meant less now. Their gene seed would be reclaimed if possible, their bodies given to the sarcophagi or the flames. The living would carry new scars. "Archeo?" Mephiston asked. "Dead," Rafen said very softly. There was no joy in it, only the slow, grinding acceptance of a man who had done what had to be done and would never stop paying for it. Later, aboard the Europe, they gathered the loose ends. Traitor gene seed recovered from those who had turned too far. Surviving Archeo loyalists were disarmed and confined, their fates sealed in chains, rather than in blood, for the moment. The ecclesiarchs of Sabian sent obsequious messages, eager to paint the conflict in whatever colours the blood angels found acceptable. Somewhere, no doubt, scribes were already composing a sanitized version of events. In the Strategium, Mephiston stood once more before Dante's image, this time projected across the void rather than in the same room. "I asked you for truth," Dante said. "You have sent me more than I wished." "Archeo was a victim," Mephiston said. "Stele was the architect. Malphalax danced the strings. Our own weakness tied the knots." "And the brothers who followed him?" Dante asked. "What judgment do you demand for them, Lord of Death?" The old title sat on the words like a weight. Mephiston considered. "Some were fools," he said. "Some were guilty of nothing more than hope. Others crossed the line into true treachery. I could sort them for you, one by one, with my sight. I could tell you whose memories smell of chaos and whose do not." "You do not sound eager," Dante observed. "I have killed enough hope for one age," Mephiston said. "If we butcher every man who dared to believe in a miracle, we will have no one left who can bear the burden of our curse. Mercy and extermination share a face here. You must choose which side of it you will show." Dante was silent for a long time. "Very well," he said at last. "Bring them home in chains. We will judge them, on Baal, where their bones belong. As for Stele and Malphalax, that ledger is not yet balanced. I have no doubt they will trouble us again, in one guise or another." The projection flickered and died. In the aftermath, Mephiston sought Rafen one last time before the Europe set course. The sergeant stood in a viewing chamber, looking out at Sabian as it receded, a white and wounded jewel. "You carry heavy ghosts," Mephiston said, coming to stand beside him. "I killed my brother," Rafen said. "I struck you down. I saw angels and demons trade places in a single breath. Yes, I suppose I do." "You saved the chapter," Mephiston said. "Twice at least. Once when you put the spear through Archeo, instead of letting him drag more of us into the abyss. Again when you turned it on me." Rafen glanced at him sidelong. "I have heard some call you Miracle Now," he said. "Twice you fell to the rage. Twice you returned. That is not supposed to be possible." Mephiston let his gaze drift to the stars. "Nothing about me is supposed to be possible," he said. "That is what frightens them, and what they cling to. They will paint me as proof that the curse can be beaten. They will ignore the cost." Rafen was silent. "If you had died under that cathedral, under Sabian's roof, under 100 other ruins," the sergeant said at last, "the blood angels would have lost a weapon. perhaps they would have lost more. I do not know. I am a simple warrior, not a seer. No one in this age is simple, Mephiston said. Not anymore. He turned away from the viewport. Remember this, Rafen, he said, pausing in the doorway. When the choice comes, there will rarely be a clean line between mercy and necessary killing. Both can wear the same face. In Sabian's Basilica, you showed mercy when you killed Archeo quickly, instead of letting us tear him apart under Malphalax's spell. You showed mercy again when you struck me, knowing it might damn you if you failed. Carry that knowledge. It may save us again. When he left, Raven remained, watching the shrinking shrine world. Behind him, in Mephiston's chest, the shadow angel shifted in its cage, restless, amused, and perhaps just a little afraid. The Lord of Death walked the Europa's halls with his usual silent tread, the warp around him thrumming with new scars. He had faced false angels and true demons, watched his brothers kill one another under painted vaults, and conquered the Black Rage a second time. He knew, with the cold certainty that had always guided him, that the galaxy would not forgive such defiance lightly. The Tyranids came like a falling night. In the Red Scar, a whole swathe of the galaxy already gutted by prior wars, the first tendrils of Hive Fleet Leviathan slid from the warp. Bioships the size of cities knifed through the void, their living hulls shedding spores and mycetic cysts. Their shadows fell across half a dozen starving systems before they curved, guided by a hunger older than any star, toward a single blood-red jewel. Baal. On the Fortress Monastery's command decks, Lord Dante watched the augur returns turn from troubling to impossible. The Strategium's hololiths showed the Red Scar in shifting light. Icons marked the positions of Imperial battle groups, scattered and thin. Over them, like bruises blooming in flesh, the purple-black signatures of Leviathan multiplied. Filaments of tendril fleets curled and coiled, each one a wave of biomass ready to spend itself in planetary annihilation. "They come for us," Dante murmured. Behind him, Mephiston said nothing. The chief librarian stood in the glow of the displays, feeling the warp shudder. The Tyranids were not psychically loud in the way demons were, all shrieking personality and malice. Their presence was a pressure, a steady, implacable push, the mindless will of an appetite so vast it barely noticed the individual, worlds it devoured. They had tasted sons of Sanguinius before, at Tyron and elsewhere. Perhaps some echo of that gene scent had drawn them here. The Blood Angels did not stand alone. By Dante's order, distress calls and summons had gone out across the Imperium. Responses had come back from every corner of the Red Scar and beyond. Now, on the projector, new icons flared as the chapter's successors arrived, translating in from the warp in ragged but determined order. Flesh-tearers, angels in carmine, angels sanguine, blood drinkers, dozens of chapters, each a shard of Sanguinius's legacy, each bringing its own ships and strike forces. Beyond them, transports and cruisers of the Astra Militarum gathered, their holds stuffed with regiments raised from half-forgotten worlds. Mechanicus vessels glided in cold formation, their intent as opaque as their doctrines. Thousands of Astartes, someone whispered. Billions of mortal auxilia. Not enough, Mephiston thought. Against this, never enough. The shield of Baal was raised, fleets redeployed, forming overlapping spheres of fire. Defense stations woke from centuries of slumber, their guns thundering test shots into the void. On Baal and its moons, redoubts were reinforced. Recruiting tribes gathered under the shadow of drop bastions, their fevered prayers bleeding upward into the warp. It would not be enough to wait. The Cryptus system was where they chose to bleed first. As Leviathan's tendrils reached out, Dante struck outward with his gathered forces, meeting the Xenos not at Baal's gate, but in the worlds around it. Cryptus became a killing ground, a sacrificial hearth where whole planets would be thrown into the fire to buy time. On Asphodex, a world of cracked red plains and black cities, Mephiston stood beside Dante, Corbulo, and Captain Carleon as the first mycetic spores fell. They came down like a new kind of rain, screaming through the thin atmosphere, punching into the ground, and blossoming into impact craters. From each crater, tyrannid organisms spilled, all teeth and chitin and blades. The guard positions on the outer ridges vanished under the first tide, their last vox reports dissolving into static and shrieks. Mephiston reached into that cascading chaos and bent it. His mind touched the swarm's fringes, reading the crude impulses that drove its lesser creatures. He felt the paths they would take through the ruins, the kill zones that would emerge without conscious plan, the way the synapse beasts at the rear would adjust as their lesser kin died. Fire here, he voxed to artillery batteries dug into the hills. And here. Overlap fields. Do not waste shots on the front ranks. Break their spine. Shells fell in patterns that only made sense from above, bursting not amid the closest beasts, but among those further back, tearing gaps in the synapse net. The lesser creatures faltered, directionless for vital moments, and in that falter, the blood angels struck, dropping from the skies in red comets, chainswords and bolters taking a toll that might actually be noticed amid the swarm. At his side, Gabriel Seth watched, one gauntlet resting on the chain axe that had made him infamous. The flesh-tearer's chapter master was almost a caricature of his lion's curse, broad-shouldered, scarred, eyes hot with barely concealed contempt for anything that smelt of compromise. His armor was as battered as it was lethal, each dent and scrape a souvenir. You play games with artillery patterns while monsters eat worlds, Seth said, without hostility, simply stating his view. You step 3 moves ahead, as if this were a regicide board. Does it help, Mephiston, when the swarm drops onto your head anyway? Mephiston watched a brood of carnifexes stagger under overlapping bombardment, then topple, limbs flailing. It helps some live long enough to die where it matters, he said. Seth snorted. Cold, he said. Predictable. Efficient. That is why Dante leans on you. I have a different creed. He thumbed the activation rune on his axe. The teeth roared. When the tide rises, you do not count every drop, Seth said. You wade in up to your chest and hack until the water is a different color. You do not outthink the beast. You out-butcher it. There is a thin line, Mephiston murmured, between out-butchering the beast and becoming something it would recognize as kin. Seth's grin was humorless. If that is the price of keeping Baal alive, I will pay it, he said. Will you? Mephiston did not answer. The honest answer would have frightened men less acquainted with monsters. Cryptus burned. World by world, rock by rock, the Tyranids stripped the system. Asphodex's cities fell. Lysios drowned under a sea of bioforms. Asteroids, moons, even orbital debris were fed into living reclamation pools and melted down into nutrient slurry. Every sacrifice, every stand, bought a little more time for Baal. Not enough. Even as the last Imperial ships evacuated the wreck of Cryptus, the main mass of Leviathan shifted course, the shadows of its greatest organisms falling across the red scar in a path that led straight to Sanguinius's home. On Baal, an older ritual answered the Xenos approach. The long sleep. Mephiston lay down in a stasis crypt deep within the fortress monastery. Wards flickered around the sarcophagus, lines of power and faith intersecting in patterns as old as the chapter itself. Sanguinary priests stood watch, their faces solemn. Chaplains intoned litanies of protection. Dante himself watched as the stasis field shimmered to life, freezing Mephiston's body in suspended stillness. His mind was not so easily chained. The long sleep was never mere stasis for him. It was a loosening of the bonds between flesh and soul, a chance to walk the inner paths of the warp without the distraction of battlefield stimuli. Now, with Leviathan bearing down, the chapter needed more than guns and blades. It needed sight. He drifted. Memories rose around him like gravestones. Hades' hive, Sabian, Solon, each a monument to a choice made, a battle won or turned sideways, He walked past them, deeper, leaving his own life behind, as he sank into the red river that was the shared inheritance of the Blood Angels. The first figure he saw was an impossibility. A harlequin stepped from the dark, motley costume, a riot of colour even here, in this place that had no light in any conventional sense. Its mask was a smiling face, blank and theatrical. Bells chimed softly with each movement, though no wind blew. "A dangerous path, little angel," it said, voice neither male nor female, syllables edged with an Eldari lilt. "You sink into your own blood and hope to come up clean." "I have never hoped for that," Mephiston said. "Why are you here, Xenos?" "Because your doom has grown entertaining," the harlequin said. "And because my masters have an interest in ensuring that when you fall, you do so in the right direction." It gestured. The warp shifted. Scenes unfolded around them, vast and terrible. Mephiston saw the 5th company of the Blood Angels, banners bright, dropping from orbit toward the ruin of a world. He saw them land, fight, bleed, their eyes darkening one by one as the black rage took them. He saw Astaroth standing over the last survivors, axe ready, tears of blood on his cheeks. "Your curse blooms," the harlequin said. The vision changed. He saw the 13th Black Crusade unfurl, the Cadian Gate awash with chaos fleets, the Despoiler's hand reaching for the throat of the Imperium. Worlds that had stood since the Great Crusade broke and burned. The Astronomicon flickered, stretched thin. "Your Emperor's light dims," the harlequin murmured. Another shift. Baal. He saw his home drenched in shadow, the fortress monastery consumed by bioforms, its bastions swarming with tyrannid beasts, the recruiting tribes scattered or devoured. Baal Secundus and Baal Prime both covered in the crawling carpet of the Great Devourer. Through that nightmare, one figure strode. Not tyrannid, not human. Kabhanda. The bloodthirster had haunted the sons of Sanguinius since Cygnus Prime. It had broken the Legion's pride, torn their father's body, and laughed as they bled. Mephiston had seen it in echoes, in visions of that old betrayal. But here, in this future, it was real again. A towering engine of rage stalked across Baal's scarred surface, axe dripping, wings spread wide against a sky filled with descending spores. In one clawed hand, it held a severed angel statue's head, the face of Sanguinius worn smooth by centuries of pilgrim touch, now crushed. "This is not a simple battle," the harlequin said. "Your foes converge. The Great Devourer wants your flesh. The Blood God wants your soul. You stand in the path of both." "Show me how it can be otherwise," Mephiston said, laughter, soft and sad. "If there were a path without pain, do you think I would be here?" the harlequin asked. "No, Lord of Death. There is only the question of how you spend your blood, wake and choose." It faded as if it had never been. Mephiston's eyes snapped open in the stasis crypt. The long sleep cracked around him like old ice. He sat up, ripping lines of dried wax and parchment seals from his armor. The sanguinary priest who had been watching jolted, hand flying to his heart, as the chief librarian swung his legs over the side of the slab. "Summon the librarium," Mephiston said. "All of it. And send word to our cousins. I require every psyker of Sanguinius's line who can still hold a warding rune steady." The Krua Mountains rose jagged from Baal's scarred surface. Under their roots, bloodstone veins ran, mineral deposits stained red by age and violence. In ancient days, these had been used, in rituals whose record was buried even deeper than the mines. Now, as Leviathan blotted out more and more of the sky, Mephiston returned to them. In a cavern lit by witchlight and lumen globes, librarians gathered. Blood angels, flesh, tearers, angels, sanguine, angels, encarmine. Psychers from a dozen chapters, all sharing the same gene seed, the same curse. Their armor bore different heraldry, but in the warp, their souls sang in recognizably similar harmonies. They formed a circle around a pit in the cavern floor, a natural shaft that plunged into the bloodstone depths. Runes had been carved into its rim, old beyond any of them, their meanings half-guessed and half-intuited. Mephiston had pored over fading records to reconstruct this rite. It was not entirely imperial. Some of the sigils owed more to forbidden sorcery than to sanctioned Psychoner. Asterath stood at the circle's edge, axe haft planted on the rock. "What you propose treads close to damnation," the Redeemer said. "You would open a window into the realm of a god that hates us." "I would strike at a demon that hates us more," Mephiston replied. "Kabanda is not a name in a book. It is an enemy that has hunted our line since before Baal ever saw a tyrannid. It will use the Devourer's shadow as cover to manifest again. If we do nothing, it will rise on Baal at our moment of greatest weakness." "You cannot kill a bloodthirster with a glance," one of the flesh-tearer's librarians said. "Not even you." "No," Mephiston agreed. "But we can reach into its master's realm and make its passage harder. We can wound it, delay it, disrupt the path it must take. Perhaps we can turn some of its fury onto the swarm, buy time with chaos blood." Asterath's jaw tightened. "This is heresy," he said. "Yes," Mephiston said. "Measured, targeted, necessary." The Redeemer stared at him for a long heartbeat, then nodded once. "Very well," he said. "If you fall, I will cut your head from your shoulders. Until then, I will stand guard." The ritual began. They reached out together, a choir of minds with a single purpose. Power rose from the circle like heat from a forge, invisible and immense. The bloodstone in the walls drank it, resonated with it, amplified it. Runes glowed, lines of force tracing themselves in the air. Mephiston stood at the center, arms outstretched, eyes closed, his soul a spear aimed at a realm no mortal had any right to touch. The warp parted. For a moment, they saw into Khorne's domain. It was an endless battlefield, a horizonless expanse of broken ground slick with blood and strewn with skulls. Mountains of bone rose and fell like frozen waves. Rivers of gore flowed under a sky choked with smoke and fire. Across that nightmare, demons marched and fought and died and rose and marched again, an eternal carnage. At the heart of it, perhaps, a brass citadel loomed, but their sight could not quite rise that far. It caught instead on a more immediate presence, Kabanda. The bloodthirster strode across that mad landscape, axe in hand, wings leaving trails of sparks in the filthy air. Its eyes burned with a hatred that was almost clean in its simplicity. Chains clinked at its waist, each link a promise of another massacre. Its gaze lifted, sensing the intrusion. For an instant, its attention met Mephiston's. Rage crashed against will. They tried to close the window. Khorne did not appreciate peeping guests. Mephiston felt a counterblow slam into the circle, not aimed at them with precision, but simply erupting from that realm like a geyser. Bloodstone cracked. The cavern shook. The shaft beneath them belched hot air and dust. The last thing he saw before the ceiling fell was Kabanda laughing. They woke buried. Darkness pressed in on all sides. The librarians were entombed in the bloodstone mines, shafts collapsed, entrances sealed by tons of rock. Many had died in the initial cave-in, their armor crushed, their bodies broken. Those who lived were trapped, their warplate alarm runes screaming damage reports. Mephiston lay half-pinned under a fallen column, his legs numb, his helm cracked. His lungs labored against the dust. The psychic backlash still rang in his skull. He reached out. The surface was a distant roar. He felt Baal Primus convulse under the twin assault of tyrannids and demon. The fortress monastery's void shields flared and died. Bioships vomited spore pods directly onto the planet's skin. In the inferno that followed, he sensed knights of blood battling under a sky of falling monsters, excommunicated but still loyal, their red armor indistinguishable from his own in the slurry of war. Kabanda howled. The bloodthirster tore its way into real space on Baal's blasted plains, just as Mephiston had feared. The warp scar left by the ritual had not prevented its passage. If anything, it had given the daemon a handhold. The beast strode across fields where tyrannids and angels clashed, its roars shaking the bones of mountains. It smashed aside gaunts and warriors alike, uncaring whether the blood it spilled was Xenos or human. Wherever it passed, the black rage flared in those of Sanguinius's line nearby, memories of Cygnus Prime and the Primarch's agony erupting afresh. Some angels turned their fury on the demon, others, lost in visions, hacked at anything that moved. "Damnation," Mephiston whispered, lips cracked. He watched as Baal's moons were eaten hollow, their ancient tribes devoured, their red sands churned into living carpets of chitin. He watched as the fortress monastery's outer bastions fell, consumed under tides of claws. He saw successor chapters make their last stands in the shadow of fallen spires, banners torn and trampled. Once, he sensed Dante on the wall, the chapter master's aura a steady, golden flame amid the storm. He felt Astaroth reap the lost, axe rising and falling as he granted quick deaths to those who had fallen too far into the rage to return. He felt Corbulo moving through field hospitals that were little more than charnel pits, doing what little could be done. The tyrannids feasted. The earth drank their blood, and that of the defenders alike. Oceans of biomatter shifted from one form to another as the Hive Fleet adapted to resistance. Leviathan did not care about glory or about any narrative. It cared only about mass and energy. And then, as suddenly as a lamp snuffed, its attention moved. Something happened far away. Mephiston felt it only as a change in the pressure of the warp. Somewhere beyond his immediate reach, forces he had only read of in ancient tomes stirred. The Despoiler's greatest gambit, the fall of Cadia, the birth of the Great Rift. The galaxy screamed. On Baal, it meant reprieve. A storm within the warp tore a rend across the sky, a wound no one had wanted. In its wake, for twisted reasons of their own, the Tyranids faltered. Portions of Leviathan were dragged away, burned by unnatural energies, or diverted to new, more immediate prey. Baal was left, not untouched, but unconsumed. A morsel the devourer had started, but not finished. Time passed. Mephiston did not know how long. Trapped in the dark with only his own thoughts and the distant aftershocks of the wider galaxy's convulsions, he came closer to true madness than he had in Hades's grave. The black rage prowled its cage, invigorated by Kabanda's rampage. The Harlequin's words echoed. When at last rescue came, it did so with more mundane violence. Servitors and tech marines had dug. Plasma cutters had burned. Explosive charges had been set with care. A section of the cavern roof gave way with a thunder of falling debris, and light stabbed down, harsh and blinding. Hands reached in. Voices shouted. It took time to free them all, to pull half-buried librarians from the rubble and, inventory, the dead. When Mephiston finally stepped out into the open air, the sky above Baal was a stranger. The moons were different. Baal's twin satellites, once familiar in their scars and dusty hues, were altered. Baal Secundus was pocked with new impact sites and crawling with abandoned bioforms now withering for lack of a hive mind. The other moon, once a red globe, was a half-eaten husk. The fortress monastery itself bore fresh wounds. Whole sections of its outer walls were gone, replaced by temporary bastions and hasty fortifications. Scorch marks and claw gouges marred its adamantium bones. On a high platform, Dante waited. Astaroth stood beside him, armor dulled, axe across his back. Both looked older, though such things were subjective in Astartes. Weariness hung on them like dust. "You live," Dante said as Mephiston approached. "So do you," Mephiston replied, "against odds that made mockery of all my calculations." Dante's mouth twisted. "Guilliman came," he said, "with his crusade, with Primaris and miracles and half the Imperium in ruins behind him. If you had stayed in your cavern, you might have been spared the sight of a son of the Emperor walking our halls with living legends at his back. And Kabanda? Mephiston asked. Banished, Astaroth said. Not by us, not cleanly. The demon raged across Baal until the Tyranids dragged it down, smothering it under sheer numbers. We reaped what we could in the aftermath. All we truly accomplished was surviving. He looked at Mephiston, eyes hard. And you, he said, what did you accomplish in your hole in the mountain? You reached into the blood god's house and invited his gaze. You helped tear the veil wider. This, he gestured at the sky, where the great rift's baleful glow was now visible even in daylight as a scar of sickly colour, is the age you brought us. Mephiston lifted his gaze. The cicatrix maledictum cut the heavens from horizon to horizon, a wound of raw warp light. It bled colours that did not exist in any sane spectrum, a constant reminder that reality itself had been broken. The Astronomicon flickered beyond it, barely visible. He had known, abstractly, that the 13th Black Crusade would bring catastrophe. The Harlequin had shown him hints. Now he saw the result naked. The nightmares he had fought all his life, the demons and Tyranids and false angels, had been preludes. This was the true stage. An Imperium split in two, half marooned in nightmare, half clinging to the guttering light of terror. His chapter, his blood, balanced on the knife edge between extinction and damnation. The line you walk grows thinner, Astaroth said. There is little daylight left between sanctioned psyker and sorcerer, between librarian and warlock. Daylight is in short supply across the galaxy, Mephiston said. We live by the light we can steal. Dante watched him with the calm of a man who had led his sons through hell and knew more fires waited. What will you do now, Lord of Death? He asked. The Tyranids will come again. Chaos will not forget us. Our curse festers. We have Primaries now among our ranks, gene-wrought warriors that claim to share our blood. The old ways crack. The new are untested. Mephiston studied the rift, then the smashed moons, then the blood-stained stones of his home. I will go further, he said. Further? Dante's voice did not rise. You have already walked into the realm of a god and back. You have broken the rage twice. You have strangled a demon with your bare hands. What further is there? The heart of the curse, Mephiston replied. We have treated our affliction as a beast to chain and a stain to endure. That has not saved us. If anything, it has made us brittle. The galaxy has changed. We must change with it or die. I will find new ways to cage the angel's madness. I will learn old secrets the Imperium turned its face from. I will stand between our blood and the hungers that want it, even if to do so, I must become something that would horrify the men who wrote our first codices. Astaroth's grip tightened on his axe. You skate on the edge of sorcery, he warned. I am long past the edge, Mephiston said softly. The only question now is whether I fall for myself or for my brothers. He turned away from the view. In the halls below, Primaris warriors moved, taller and broader, their armour subtly different. Among them, he saw the first of those who would one day call him Lord, not only as a librarian, but as something else. A hybrid, a crossing of old and new. The Rubicon Primaris waited. Mephiston walked toward it with his usual measured stride, the shadow angel in his chest pacing its cage, the great rift bleeding overhead, and a resolve in his soul darker and sharper than it had ever been. The age of simple choices was over. The age to come would demand monsters on humanity's side. The galaxy screamed. In the era men would later call Indomitus, the Imperium bled from 1,000,000 cuts. The great rift burned across the heavens like a wound that would not close. Half the realm of mankind lay lost in a twilight of broken warp roots and snarled astropathic screams. The other half clung to the heel of a resurrected Primarch, marching at the head of a crusade that was equal parts salvation and autopsy. On Baal, the sons of Sanguinius counted the cost. The fortress monastery still stood, but its walls were new in places, its scars fresh. The moons were changed, eaten, and half remade. Leviathan's spore lingered in the very soil. Primaris warriors drilled in the training fields, their taller forms moving in lockstep with battle brothers who looked suddenly, subtly, smaller. Mephiston watched them from a balcony, feeling the old world and the new grind against one another in his bones. He had emerged from the bloodstone caverns into a galaxy that had taken his worst fears and made them mundane. The curse in his veins was the same, but everything around it had intensified. Stronger enemies, wilder warp storms, a Primarch of the line of Guilliman walking in flesh, while Sanguinius remained forever a shade. The shadow angel in his soul paced its cage. It whispered when he closed his eyes. It showed him futures where the blood angels dissolved under their curse, their successors falling one by one until the last of Sanguinius's blood screamed itself to silence. It showed him other futures, colder, where the chapter survived by becoming something he barely recognized, its compassion excised, its honor pared away to a hard, ugly core. He stood between those visions like a man bracing damaged walls. One day, in the Strategium, he spoke. "Give me the Rubicon," he said. Dante turned from the hololith. The chapter master looked older again, though that was mostly in the set of his shoulders, the slow, considered movements that betrayed the weight of command rather than biology. His eyes narrowed. "You would gamble your existence on Kol's gift," Dante said. "You have seen the death rates. Many who lie down on that table do not rise." "Many do," Mephiston replied. "Those who do are stronger, hardier. This age demands more than we were. You know that. Guilliman's warriors bear our blood now in forms Sanguinius never envisioned. If I remain what I am while the chapter changes around me, I become an artifact. Useful, perhaps, but eventually brittle." Astarath's voice cut across them like the edge of his axe. "And if you become something worse?" the Redeemer asked. "You are already a blasphemy by some lights, Mephiston. Twice the Black Rage claimed you. Twice you dragged yourself back. I have argued more than once that such defiance of fate should be answered with a blade. Yet here I stand," Mephiston said mildly. "On the edge of a deeper fall," Astarath snapped. "The Rubicon kills many. The process tears apart body and soul and stitches them back together with machines and gene craft no one fully understands. You are not a simple battle brother. What lives in your chest is not simple madness. If the Rubicon twists it, magnifies it, we may wake not to a Lord of Death, but to the Black Angel walking in flesh." "Then kill me afterward," Mephiston said. The words hung in the air. "I choose this," he went on. "Not out of pride, though I will not claim I lack it. Not out of vanity, though I know my name carries weight. I choose it because the age to come will break anything that does not grow harder. If I cross and fail, you lose a single weapon. If I cross and succeed, you gain something the chapter will need. A bridge between old blood and new, between curse and cure." Dante studied him. "You are not asking permission," the chapter master said. "No," Mephiston agreed. "I am informing you, but I offer this. If, when I rise, you judge me more danger than asset, I will not resist your sentence." Astarath's eyes burned. "I will hold you to that," he said. The surgeon priests prepared the chamber. It lay deep within the fortress, a sanctum of steel and sanctified glass, where cogitators hummed and arrays of surgical servo arms hung overhead like a forest of metal limbs. Alchemical tanks bubbled with nutrient solutions tailored to the Primaris process. Gene seed vials glowed behind stasis fields. There was an altar in the corner, because this was as much ritual as procedure. Mephiston lay upon the slab without ceremony. He had been stripped of his armor, his pale flesh crisscrossed with scars and the subtle ridges of old trauma. He looked almost human like that, in the way that a weapon looks almost harmless when placed on a table. Cables slid into ports at his spine and wrists. Needles pierced veins. Coolants and anesthetic agents ran. Sanguinary priests stood beside the robed Magos biologists overseeing the operation, their red and white armor a counterpoint to the Martian's robed bulk. Asterath watched from the shadows, helm on, face unreadable behind the skull. "Last words, Chief Librarian?" the Magos asked, mechadendrites whirring. Mephiston considered. "If this fails," he said, "burn my body to ash and scatter it over Baal. Do not entomb me. Do not risk another grave." "Understood," the Magos intoned. Darkness rose around him as the drugs bit. His last glimpse of the physical world was of Dante's silhouette in the doorway, still, watching. There was worry there, and a colder calculation. The look of a man who had decided on a coin toss because all other options led only to slow death. Then the knife fell. The Rubicon was not death in the simple sense. It was dismantling. Organs were cut free, enhanced, replaced. Bones were broken and reforged. Gene structures were overwritten with new patterns drawn from Cal's vaults. Hearts were stopped, restarted, stopped again. At some point in that process, Mephiston's body could no longer support consciousness. His soul fell from it like a shadow from a burned corpse. He plummeted into the warp. There was no transition. One moment he lay on steel. The next, he stood in an endless red plain under a sky he did not recognize. The air tasted of rust and old prayers. Around him, shapes loomed, some half-formed, some too sharp to be real. Memories and possibilities walked side by side. Two figures waited. One was light, radiant but not gentle. An armored form, with wings like the sunrise, every feather edged in fire. Its helm was a stylized angel's face, its eyes bright, its posture that of someone forever on the verge of charging into a hopeless battle because no other path was acceptable. The Sanguinor, the angelic avatar that had appeared and vanished throughout the chapter's history, a manifestation of Sanguinius's nobility. The other was Shadow. Black wings ragged, made of smoke and torn banners, armor like Mephiston's own, but twisted, the teardrop icon inverted, the chalice overflowing with something darker than blood. Its face was hidden, but he did not need to see it. He knew it from a lifetime of half-glimpsed reflections. The Black Angel, the warp shape of the rage, a fragment of their father's agony given cruel will. They stood at either side of an unseen line, mirror images that refused to touch. "Lord of Death," the Sanguinor said. Its voice was like a bell tolling over a battlefield. "You have come further than any of your brothers. Too far, some might say." "Not far enough," the Black Angel hissed. Its voice was Mephiston's own, layered with 1,000 other screams. "You chain me. You use me. You pretend you are anything but my shell." Mephiston looked from one to the other. "I came because my body is being torn apart," he said. "Because your gene line changes around me. Because the galaxy has split and bled. I came because I'm tired of fighting blind." The Sanguinor inclined its head. "Then hear this," it said. "You are doomed, Mephiston. You have always been doomed. From the moment the rage first brushed you in the ecclesiarchy ruins on Hades, from the night you clawed out of your grave and named yourself Lord of Death, you have taken into yourself more of our father's death scream than any other son. Sooner or later you will become this." It gestured to the Black Angel. The shadow grinned, unseen. "You already feel it," the Sanguinor continued. "The way your thoughts tilt toward harsh necessity, the way mercy and extermination blur, the way your brothers flinch when you enter a room, even as they cling to you. That is not an accident. That is the echo of Sanguinius's rage seeking an outlet. Let it out," the Black Angel whispered. "Stop pretending. Stop caging. Rip off the mask. Let us end this farce together." Mephiston did not deny it. Every day since Armageddon had been a dance along that edge. He had killed in the name of salvation, sacrificed worlds to save sectors, turned weapons on his own when it was the only path. The lines between monster and guardian had blurred long ago. "What choice is there?" he asked. The Sanguinor's light dimmed, as if sorrow passed through it. "A poor one," it said. "You can continue as you are, resisting, patching cracks in a dam that will eventually burst. One day, the Black Angel will break free in you, fully, and you will kill more of your own blood than any enemy ever did before someone puts you down. Or you accept me now." The Black Angel purred, "not as a chain that breaks, but as a thing you wrap around yourself. You become the cage, you let me fill you, and in doing so, you take some of me away from all the others." "The black rage would lessen," the Sanguinor said. "Not vanish, never that, but it would weaken. Fewer of your brothers would fall. Fewer would die screaming visions of the War Master. Their nights would be quieter. Their dawns would belong to them, not to a ghost." "At a cost," Mephiston said. "Yes," the Sanguinor said simply. "You would be a focus, a lightning rod. Their curse would run into you. You would walk closer to the edge than any living thing has ever dared. You would be feared more than you are now. You would be hunted by our enemies and perhaps by some of our own, should they forget why you chose this. And when, not if, you finally fall," the Black Angel added happily, "you will do more damage than all the others combined. You will be a storm. You will be the thing the poets of this age shudder to name." It spread its tattered wings. "But until then," it said, "they will live. More of them, anyway. Little brothers who would otherwise die like beasts in cages." Silence stretched across that unreal plain. Mephiston weighed the futures they showed him. In one, he saw himself staying as he was, fighting the rage day by day until some small slip gave it purchase. The slaughter that would follow was breathtaking. Baal burning from within, successor chapters torn apart by the very symbol they had trusted. In the other, he saw years, perhaps centuries, in which the Blood Angel's curse was lighter. More battle brothers standing at the walls instead of screaming in the Tower of Amareo. Fewer Death Company charges that ended in waste. He saw himself, darker, more feared, less trusted. He saw councils falling silent when he entered, allies leaving a seat between them and him. A necessary monster. "I was damned the day I was taken from Baal's sands," he said. "All of us were. Sanguinius chose that when he flew to his death. We bear it because we are his. If I can spend that damnation buying my brothers a longer reprieve, I will." The Black Angel leaned forward. "Say it," it hissed. "Invite me. Make it real." Mephiston met its unseen gaze. "Come in," he said. "But hear this, Shadow. You are not my master. You are my burden. I will carry you until I break, not an instant sooner." The Sanguinor stepped forward, light flaring. It reached out, touching Mephiston's brow. At the same moment, the Black Angel lunged, wings snapping around them both. Light and dark collided. Pain unlike anything Hades had inflicted ripped through him as something vast and rending plunged into his soul. On the slab, in the real, his heart stopped. The monitors around the operating table flatlined into a howl. The Magos's mechadendrites spasmed, recalibrating, flooding the body with stimulants and shock currents. Sanguinary priests shouted litanies and orders, their voices overlapping. "We are losing him. He is gone. Continue the procedure, by the Primarch. Do not you dare stop. You will destroy what remains," another snapped. "We should end this now, obliterate the body. He is too dangerous to leave half alive." Asterath stood in the doorway, axe in hand. "If he does not rise within a short time," the Redeemer said, "I will take his head." That was the agreement. "You will wait," Dante said. He had not moved since the process began, watching with the stillness of a statue. His hand rested on the hilt of his own blade, not in threat, but in readiness. Gilliman's surgeons did not forge these processes for the faint-hearted, Dante said. We knew the risk. We chose it. We will see it through to the end. Hours that felt like ages passed. Inside the warp, Mephiston screamed himself hoarse as light and shadow rewrote him. The Sanguinor's touch seared trails through his essence, etching new lines. The Black Angel flowed into the spaces left by the Rubicon's tearing, filling cracks, binding itself to every nerve of his psyche. He thought, once, that he truly died. Then breath tore back into his lungs. He sat bolt upright on the slab, tearing cables and lines from his flesh. Machines shrieked, screens shattered under flares of uncontrolled psychic discharge. Sanguinary priests staggered back, blood seeping from their eyes and noses as his aura slammed into them. The world was different, sharper, louder. The warp roared in colours and currents he had never been able to resolve before. He felt bale around him, every rock and grain of dust. He felt the fortress monastery as a living thing, its machine spirits humming, its wards strained but intact. He felt faintly the presence of Primaris brothers in the training fields, their gene work a harmonious chord that had not been there when he last closed his eyes. He felt the Black Angel within him, no longer simply caged, but coiled around his spine, purring. He swung his legs off the slab. Chaplains and priests made the sign of the Aquila, not in rote reverence, but as if warding themselves. Astaroth's helm tilted, lenses narrowing. "What are you?" the Redeemer asked quietly. Mephiston considered the answer. "I am Mephiston," he said, and his voice was deeper, resonant in a way that made lumen bulbs flicker. "And I am not." Silence greeted that. Then the Magos, in a burst of static, began chattering about successful integration of Primaris organs, enhanced organ function, improved resilience. The sanguinary priests murmured prayers of thanks and fear in equal measure. Astaroth took a step forward. "We had an agreement," he said. "If you rose twisted, if you rose less yourself." "You would cut me down," Mephiston finished for him. "Do you judge me less myself, Redeemer?" Astaroth's fingers tightened on his axe. "I judge you." "Other," he said. "I can smell Khorne's realm on you, as if you walked its fields and came back with dirt on your boots. I can taste the black rage in your every word. You are a prison for it now, not just a soul that cages its own fragment." "Which weakens it in the rest," Mephiston said. "You know that. You can feel it. The tower will not empty, but its screams will lessen." Astaroth ground his teeth. "Yes," he admitted. "I felt it when you woke. A pressure lifting, just a little. I should thank you for that, and still want to take your head." "You may yet," Dante said. All eyes turned. The chapter master stepped into the surgical light, golden mask at his belt, bare face lined. "We live now in an age of compromises," he said. "Gilliman walks with us, and yet he carries changes that cut against everything our father believed about the legions. Primaris blood flows beside ours. The sky itself has been torn like paper. Mephiston has made himself into a bulwark against our curse. If I kill him now, I buy a cleaner conscience at the cost of many brothers' futures. I will not make that trade." Astaroth bowed his head, but did not relax his grip. "As you will, my lord," he said, "but I will watch him, more closely than ever." "I would expect nothing less," Mephiston said. The new powers came quickly. In battle, Mephiston found he could split his awareness, peeling parts of himself away to attend to different aspects of the fight. His body fought with sword and hand and bolt of force. His mind extended, an invisible presence coordinating, probing, ripping at enemy leaders. A third facet descended into a darker place, where the Black Angel prowled, ready to be tapped for sudden, murderous bursts of strength when necessary. At times, for heartbeats only, he stepped sideways in time, sliding between moments. Bolter rounds slowed in the air. Blows crawled toward him. He moved through those frozen instants like a ghost, repositioning, placing allies and enemies where they needed to be when the clock started again. Eldari psychers learned to fear his name. On one maiden world, a war host of Craftworlders sought to divert the tyrannid path from their own threatened core. They came weaponized with fate, dancing through predicted lines of battle. Their farces reached out to read the future and recoiled, clutching bleeding eyes when they brushed against Mephiston's presence anchoring the opposing side. His mind was a paradox to theirs, a knot of fate that refused to resolve. "Your thoughts are too loud," one gasped over an open channel, before static swallowed his voice. In the angel's halo, under a sky painted with the psychic awakening's mad colours, Mephiston led fleets into conflicts that could barely be called battles. They were convulsions, flares of violence across systems where entire armadas tore at one another, under warp storms that changed weapon trajectories with every volley. Enemy voidcraft came apart under barrages guided by his prescience. Planetary invasions turned on fulcrums he had quietly placed weeks before when he had whispered a single suggestion into a chapter master's mind or ordered a guard regiment to dig its trenches a little to the left. He walked through command decks like a red shadow, his presence warping probability. The planet of the sorcerers tested him further. Magnus the Red, traitor Primarch, had made that impossible world his seat, a realm of floating towers and warp-torn landscapes. Demon Prince Zadkiel, his servant, wove a ritual there to bring down 9 silver towers on Terra, a catastrophe Mephiston could not allow. He infiltrated that nightmare with a small force, reality buckling around them as they walked through a place where up and down were suggestions, not laws. Ship hulks drifted like rocks in a stream of raw magic. Land masses twisted on themselves. Time looped. To reach the ritual's heart, Mephiston did something he had never dared before. He divided, not simply his attention, but his essence. He split himself into 3 aspects, each wearing a share of his soul. One strode, with the main body, blade in hand, cutting down demon packs and 1,000 suns who barred the way. Another flew ahead as a disembodied presence, a storm of thought that shredded enemy wards and turned lesser spells back on their casters. The third sank down into the lowest strata of the warp, where the Black Angel waited. He let that aspect loose in specific vicious bursts. Demon engines stumbled as invisible claws tore at their reality. Sorcerers faltered mid-incantation, their minds suddenly full of Sanguinius's dying scream. For each such intervention, a piece of him blackened, the cost paid in self. He felt Magnus's gaze brush him, curious, amused, and then turn away. In the scale of that ancient traitor Primarch's concerns, he was a single sharp stone in a vast river, but a stone can divert flow. When Zadkiel's ritual finally collapsed, its circles shattered, its towers stuttering in their translation, Mephiston pulled himself back together. He emerged from the planet of the sorcerers diminished and greater at once. He had proven that he could wield the Black Angel's strength without letting it consume him. He had also cut away more of his own restraint to do so. The war inside him did not cease. In the quiet hours between campaigns, he walked the halls of Baal's fortress, but another part of him walked the internal plane where the Sanguinor and the Black Angel had stood. The light was fainter now, though still present. The shadow was larger, though still chained. They wrestled. They argued without words. Some nights he won, and woke with a clear head and a sense of grim purpose. Other nights the Black Angel pressed harder, and he woke with dried blood under his nails and memories of dreams where he had torn flagstones from the floors with his bare hands. He never asked Astorath to stop watching him. The Redeemer's gaze on his back was a weight he welcomed. One evening, under a sky that no longer truly knew darkness, thanks to the rift's baleful glow, Mephiston stood once more on a fortress balcony. Below, the recruiting fields stretched out, lit by bonfires and lumen towers. Baelite tribesmen trained, their lean forms hammering against one another with wooden blades. Some would be chosen. Most would die in the dust, having only dreamed of the stars. Beyond them, ranks of Primaris initiates drilled, their movements a little too perfect, their genecraft humming in the warp with a note that was both kin and alien. Above, the great rift bled. It tore across the firmament from horizon to horizon, a river of unreality in the heavens. Its colors shifted, angry and beautiful. Somewhere beyond it, terror burned in its own way. Guilliman's crusade, carving paths through madness. Other chapters fighting their own wars. Mephiston rested his hands on the stone. He felt the weight of the black angel in his chest, restless, whispering of easier paths. He felt the distant touch of the sanguinor, a reminder of sacrifice chosen freely. He felt the blood angels moving in the fortress behind him, their hopes and fears and hungers. He was the Lord of Death, the mightiest librarian of the Adeptus Astartes, a jailer of a demon shadow made from his own Primarch's rage. A Primaris hybrid who had walked through hells no codex had ever anticipated. He was also, perhaps, a failure waiting to happen. The knife edge he stood on was narrow. One misstep, one moment of weakness, and he would fall in a way that would echo across every son of Sanguinius left in the galaxy. He knew this. He accepted it. "The future is written in blood," he murmured, "to no one and nothing. The question is whose." He turned away from the vista, cloak snapping in Baal's thin wind, and went back inside to the wars waiting on slate and star map.